We're going to start with our Eagle Mountain and our Cottonwoods district. So we'll get through those first, and then we'll start the official meeting. So we need a roll call, please, for Eagle Mountain. Sorry. Uh-oh, caught you.
Chairman Dickey.
Here.
Vice Chairman Friedel. Present. Board Member McMahon. Here. Board Member Charno.
Here.
Board Member Magazine. Here. Board Member Spelich.
Present.
Board Member Grisbowski.
Present.
Thank you. Grady, do you want to get started, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, before you, actually, I should say Board of Directors, before you is a presentation on the annual Eagle Mountain Community Facilities District, and that's going to be presented to you by our Facilities District, Facilities District Board, Finance Director?
Yes.
Okay, our Finance Director, David Pock, will be doing the presentation.
I'll take the same title for Eagle Mountain as well, so we don't have to do a separate one. Good evening, Mayor and Council. What's probably arguably the simplest budget that will pass this year is Eagle Mountain. Just as a background, the last bond payments were paid in July. There was no tax levy this year. There will not be one for next year. We did include the $14,200 fund balance in admin fees just to address any issues that we might have for wind-up costs as we go through the next few years. So that is that, and the bank fees basically are the only thing that are included in this year's budget. So, any questions?
Anybody have any questions, comments? Jerry? No? Okay, so yes.
Could we vote on the minutes first, please?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if anybody had a motion, because that's the first motion is to approve the minutes on page 3.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. And then what's the other action? Anything else?
Then there
Nope.
would be a motion to approve the tentative budget for.
Okay. Anybody want to make that motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So I adjourn that, right, technically? And then call the next one to order, and we know the roll call is the same. Cottonwood.
Okay. Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right.
Scrolling through here. There we go. Okay.
So the next budget is for Cottonwoods Maintenance District. This was created to maintain landscaping and their community wall. We did have a few changes this year, and then you'll see there's another item after this to approve an amendment to their landscaping contract. I believe it was December we received notice that the landscaping contract needed to be increased per month. We received another one of those notices in April. So the increased cost has gone from $4,800, which we approved for this current fiscal year, to $6,300 for next year. As a result of that, the way we didn't really anticipate any additional costs this time last year, the general fund is going to have to cover $460 of the fees for this year. As part of fiscal year 23 budget, that money will be returned to the general fund. Just some accounting and budgeting type things that we need to get taken care of as far as this year's goes. We also added 10% of budgeted expenditures for an administration fee. It takes quite a bit of time to go through and administer the contracts, either with the Public Works Director, create the budgets, do this type of thing, and we haven't charged any types of fees since it was created And we thought it was time that we should be able to recoup a little bit of those
Mayor,
costs.
Council, if I may, too, I just want to bring this to your attention. I believe it was this time last year that the Vice Mayor brought to our attention. He had asked for us to actually look at the possibility of this reverting back to an HOA. Staff did have some preliminary discussions, and it appears that while we didn't survey the entire neighborhood, some of the people that live in that area would prefer to keep it this way. So this was kind of a middle point here to try to at least recover the cost for the town to administer the district. So we have never charged in past years for the overhead costs for the town to administer the maintenance improvement district. So I think that was a good suggestion. By us looking into this further, we were able to further do cost recovery on this.
All right, and then finally, we have a $5,000 contingency that we added for next year. That's something that probably should have been done in years past, just in case contract costs increased, or if somebody ran into the wall and we had to go and repair something, we'd have the budget authority to do that. If it's not needed, it won't be used. So, are there any questions?
Any questions? Make a motion for the budget?
Move approval.
On page 6. Oh, you moved? Okay.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And then we have the landscaping item.
Yes, Mr. Weldy will be giving a brief presentation on this item.
Thank you. Madam Chair, board members, tonight we have before us a request, actually 2 requests for increase. As the finance director stated, the first one was covered out of the general fund. We are obviously asking your permission to increase the contract amount to cover those costs for the next fiscal year. And as a reminder, this is for the landscaping that is parallel to Grande and also parallel to Saguaro, just around the south and west area of the Cottonwoods. It does not cover any other areas within the Cottonwood district. With that, if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Any questions from anybody? No. Okay, can I get a motion, please? Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so adjourn that. This is always awkward every year. Now we will call to order our regular meeting, and I would ask you to please stand for the pledge and remain standing. Thank you. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Dickey,
Here.
Vice Mayor Friedel, Councilmember McMahon, Councilmember Charno, Councilmember Magazine, Councilmember Spellich, Councilmember Grisbowski.
Present.
Thank you all. We'll start with our reports by the manager and council.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. A couple weeks ago, the Chamber of Commerce held its annual gala event, and it was really well attended. As part of that event, the Economic Development Division annually gives an award to what it considers to be the top attraction or something that was offered new to attract tourism in the community or nearby. And Weekapaw Casino Resort was recognized for their significant investment, the employment. We have a number of residents here who actually live here and also work there. So anyways, that was kind of exciting to give it to the tribal community next door, and they do so much with the money that actually comes back to our community through a number of grants, so that was great. Another noteworthy event I wanted to share with the council was that last Saturday, the town was the host for the annual Arizona Sister Cities Conference. We had about 80 attendees at the community center, and it was actually organized by the Sister Cities Corporation, Fountain Hills Sister Cities Corporation, and also the Fountain Hills Sister Cities Commission that the council appoints. So it was a great event, and we had the diplomatic corps was represented there, and the featured speaker was the mayor of Cusco, Peru, which is the gateway to Machu Picchu. So we had a really good conference. That's all I have, Mayor.
Good afternoon. I also attended the Sister Cities Conference, and it was really informative, and I met a lot of wonderful people who really are passionate about being part of that conference and the Sister City organization. And also, I think it's 2 weeks ago, we had the CARES Forum on Dementia Friendly, a great speaker, a great turnout. I mean, we just had some really fantastic results from that, a very high level of interest. A friend of mine is called who wants to champion being a dementia-friendly city. So we're looking forward to working with her on that. So thank you.
I too did attend the Chamber Gala, and it was quite an event that they put on. So thank you again for all that hard work.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I got a pretty long list here, Grisbowski, I don't know, but, well, Jerry's being modest here because I was at the Chamber Gala as well, and I was on the 22nd, and he was chosen as Volunteer of the Year by the Chamber, so congrats, Jerry, on that. And on April 20th, the Drug Prevention Coalition, we hosted a symposium at the Learning Center, and we had 75 people, and the mayor kind of opened our proceedings, but we had a panel discussion about drugged and drunk driving, and a lot of parents and students were there, so it was a very nice event, and our own Judge Melton from our municipal court was one of the panelists, as well as one of our former councilmen, Tate Elke, so that went well. On the 21st, Valley Metro, we had a board meeting. It was the first meeting for our new CEO, so that was always exciting. That was later that day was the Fountain Hills Cares event that I attended as well, and found it very informative, as my mother-in-law is in those stages of dementia, unfortunately, so it was very educational. And 29th, we had a vow to drive sober discussion at the high school. Junior and senior classes did different presentations by a woman whose son was a drunk driver and crashed head-on, wrong-way driver, and then his best friend in the passenger seat was killed, and he lived for like another 18 years, very disabled and so on, but he passed away a couple years ago. But she gave a very, obviously, emotional presentation. It was right before prom on the 30th, so we felt it had a good impact to the high school kids. And then Take Back Day. Well, welcome back, Captain Larry. It's good to see you. And our sheriff's office and other folks coordinated the Take Back Day, where we collected prescription and other unwanted drugs out front here at Town Hall on Saturday, and took in 59 pounds in 4 hours. So just thought I'd pass.
Okay, well, Mike, you win. My husband's got coworkers in town, and I've been entertaining them for 2 weeks. I did go to the Chamber Gala, and I was going to say congratulations to Jerry as well, but Mike stole that from me. I did get a tour of the Bell Park Legacy Sports Complex with the Phoenix East Valley folks, and I got to say that place knocked my socks off. It has every sporting event you could possibly think of, plus training to get better at each sport. And it's for the kids, it's for the adults, it's crazy. Also, there's a bar, so that's fun too. And then, of course, the Arizona League legislative call yesterday. Otherwise, I've been with the work peeps.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you all. So I signed a letter with 26 other mayors from the league asking Congress to allocate water infrastructure funding dollars to Arizona. I went to the theater to do a proclamation for Ross Collins and the 20th anniversary of the Fountain Hills Youth Theater. Sister Cities, that was great. Again, thanks to Christine Colley for getting that into Fountain Hills. And the award gala was great. We gave the Mayor's Award, which is really all of us, to the Fountain Hills Medical Center and Emergency Room. They had won 2 other awards that night as well. And I want to congratulate all of the nominees and those who were recognized, and the Chamber for a very successful event. I was appointed to the nominating committee for MAG, Executive Committee, so we'll be doing that in the next year. They have the 1-year term, so June is usually their last meeting, and then we take the summer off. We did have MAG Regional Council. Yesterday, the Fountain Hills Civic Association, Cultural and Civic Association had their annual meeting at the Bachelor Pad, and that was really good. They did a trivial night, so that was fun. And then last, just to toot my own horn a little bit, 48 Women of the Decade. We had that announcement a couple months ago, but we had the luncheon at the Biltmore, and it was quite humbling and very nice to be there and recognized that way. So that's a Centennial Legacy project. So that wraps that up. Our next item is the proclamation for Economic Development Week. So next meeting on the 17th, we're going to have a good presentation from Amanda, but right now I'm going to just come down and give her a proclamation. Amanda, you want to come up?
That's pretty good. She's been here less than 2 months and she gets a proclamation.
I'm going to give you the fancy one to hold, and then I will read from the one that I can actually read. All right, you got it? All right, this is Amanda Jacobs, our Economic Development Director, and like I said, she'll be presenting at our next meeting, and also a new video just went up. I think Bo just put that up about tourism and Fountain Hills. There's no town like it. So anyway, whereas the International Economic Development Council, come closer, is the largest professional economic development organization dedicated to serving economic developers, and the International Economic Development Council provides leadership and excellence in economic development for communities, members, and partners through conferences, training, courses, advisory services, and research, in-depth publications, public policy advocacy, and initiatives such as the Accredited Economic Development Organization Program, the Certified Economic Development Designation, and the Entrepreneurship Development Professional. Is that all? So again, whereas economic developers promote economic well-being and quality of life for their communities by creating, retaining, and expanding jobs that facilitate growth, enhance wealth, and provide a stable tax base, and they stimulate and incubate entrepreneurship in order to help establish the next generation of new businesses, which is the hallmark of the American economy. And whereas economic developers are engaged in a wide variety of settings, including rural, urban, local, state, provincial, and federal governments, public-private partnerships, chambers of commerce, universities, and a variety of other institutions. And whereas economic developers attract and retain high-quality jobs, develop vibrant communities, and improve the quality of life in their regions, and economic developers work in Fountain Hills within the state of Arizona. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Jenny Dickey, on behalf of the town of Fountain Hills, recognizes the week of May 9th through May 13th as Economic Development Week, and remind individuals of the importance of the community celebration, which supports expanding career opportunities and making lives better. There you go. That's a mouthful. Thank you.
Well, just thank you to the mayor and council. In 2016, the International Economic Development Council created this week just to raise awareness on what economic development is, which, as you heard, is a mouthful. And so next week, we'll have a social media campaign. And so we ask you to help share that awareness and share those posts on the social media platform. And as the mayor said, there's a lot of exciting things, I know that you know, happening in our wonderful town. And so if you guys have time, come to our next council meeting to hear the update. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Next, we have our call to the public. Do we have any speaker cards? Oh, wait, what?
We have a scheduled presentation, Mayor, on Independence Day.
Okay, it's not on my written one. Sorry about that. Rachel, you're up. Thank you. Why don't I have that here?
Sure. Sorry. All right, I'm here this evening to give an update on our annual Fourth at the Fountain, our community 4th of July celebration. And I know I've talked with a number of you. I know this has been kind of a hot topic lately, so I wanted to just kind of bring and share some community information about where we are. So these are some photos from our past events. I think most of you have seen them or participated with them. It's a great time down at the park. Usually our event is from 7, starts off at 7 with a band. We do fireworks around 9. We have a general attendance of about 8 to 10,000. These are our budgets. We have about 20,000 for our fireworks display, and then another 30 to support all of the other amenities, whether that's our entertainment, all of the portable items that need to come in, our road closures, and all the fees and whatnot associated to put the event on. Just gives you a big picture idea of what we generally do. However, this year, fireworks are really, really hard to procure. It is not just us, it is a national issue, but the long and short of it is that roughly 70% of the commercial grade fireworks are manufactured in China, and due to a number of circumstances, including staffing, including COVID, including factory closures and whatnot, they're really hard to procure. And then if you can find them, they are quite expensive. So we've been watching this and working with our vendors since the first of the year. Unfortunately, we were hoping to have some good news to share by this evening that we were able to make some positive progress there. Unfortunately, that is not the case. So what we've done is we've met with a lot of our other community groups around the valley. We've been reaching out to figure out what is everybody else doing? How are they managing this situation? And this is just a sampling of other communities and where they're at with this conversation. A number of them are moving forward with 4th of July programs without fireworks. A number of them are looking to do alternative entertainment, including drones or laser light shows. And others are altering their date in order to procure fireworks when and where available. So this just gives you an idea. So where that leaves us. The way the staff has looked at it, we have essentially 3 options. One is to move forward with our standard event on July 4th. We have our band, we would have our food trucks, we have the potential for a partnership with Bonehouse. We would still need most of the supporting logistics. However, the likelihood of getting fireworks is low. Alternately, we could cancel the event, hanging on to that budget. As you saw, it's not a small budget, and reallocate that budget and still light our fountain for that evening. Or we can work with a new fireworks vendor that does have the availability for an event on July 1st, which is a Friday this coming year. So again, we would hold it similar to what we traditionally do on the 4th. We do recognize that we would need to do an intensive marketing effort because our 4th at the Fountain is sort of our label. So we would need to make sure that our community is aware of that change. And again, as I mentioned, there is a budget escalation due to the increase in the fireworks cost. So this is sort of the 3 options we have in front of us. You'll note that the staff, based on all of this information, the staff is recommending moving forward with the July 1st option in order to procure those fireworks as part of the event.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, discussion? Yes, Councilwoman?
Thank you, Rachel. If option C is selected, is it a lot more money?
It's an increase of roughly $10,000.
Okay, thank you. So you already have it budgeted, basically?
So we know that our fireworks budget is traditionally 20. The quote that we have is roughly 28. So anticipating any other changes.
We'd be able to make a transfer
Yeah.
Okay.
next to cover it.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Could we still do C and the first, still light up the fountain on the 4th?
Absolutely. We can do C and then still light the fountain on 4th of July that evening. Absolutely.
Well, that's a direction I'm leading, so for input.
Okay, great. We just wanted to make sure everyone understood that this wasn't a choice that, we made to not have fireworks on the 4th, that this is a large-scale impact to a lot of communities in the valley.
So you said we would have to, get the word out. Either way, we will if we're not doing anything on the 4th, right?
Yes. No matter what, we'll need to do that, absolutely. But given that we're already in May, 4th of July tends to sneak up on us pretty quick, so we wanted to have enough time to create create that marketing effort and get that out there essentially by Memorial Day, so the end of the month.
Okay.
It's a shame because some of us that are traditionalists always think, you celebrate Thanksgiving on Thanksgiving, you celebrate Independence Day on Independence Day, but the world's really messed up right now, and we can't get the fireworks when we want the fireworks. So, but I think the fireworks are an essential part, and I do like the idea that having the fountain at least lit that night, special colors to commemorate the Independence Day.
Absolutely.
So we're wanting to bring this before you tonight because obviously we were waiting to see if maybe our fireworks vendor that, as you can see, does all the other fireworks presentations throughout the entire state was going to be able to come through, but they just haven't been able to. We want to act fast because we want to lock in the date and be able to procure the fireworks. So that's something we can do administratively. The amount is within my signature authority. So we wanted to get you to weigh in and make sure that there was consensus for the staff recommended option here.
If you guys recommend C, I totally support that, but my only question is marketing. It's going to take some extra dollars probably over above and beyond what you actually already spend on marketing. Do you have any idea what that would be, just so we would have an idea?
That's a great question. We have not put together a marketing plan on this yet. It was kind of hinging on tonight's decision. Obviously, we would leverage all of our social media partners. And I think we can probably work with Bo to hopefully get the awareness out through some of our, whether it's the news outlets and whatnot, to make sure that we're on those lists of what's happening, on Independence Day weekend, because it's not just us that are moving off of this date. So I think there's going to be a lot of effort to make sure that residents in and around the valley are aware of all the things going on. So we'll want to make sure that we're on those lists, whether it's in the Arizona Republic or, ABC 15 or wherever they are. So we'll work with our partners that way. If we do find that we need to take out more ad space or have more paid representation, I think we can certainly look into that. We have not put that plan together yet, though.
I'll just put it out there that I understand what Grady was talking about too, and I mean, if we wanted to do something on the 4th and had lights and music and that such, I'd be okay with that. If you end up that ending up being like too expensive to go with this, or the vendor doesn't seem quite right or whatever. I mean, I think the 4th of July is the 4th of July too, and you have fun and you have music. We can have patriotic music and such. So I'm fine if that's what it ends up being too.
Great.
So we're not voting or anything like that. We're just giving you the impression.
Just getting some feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot you.
That's okay.
I printed out the old agenda. That's,
Quite okay.
I wanted to mention that one of the items on the agenda, 8E, is not going to be heard tonight. I don't know if, Aaron, you want to kind of expand on that?
Sure, Mayor and Council, thank you. Yesterday, the town manager, Development Services Director Wesley, and I had an informal meeting with the developer and their representative, and they had some last-minute changes that they wanted to see to the contract that we weren't aware of. So at this point, there obviously is an adequate time to make those and make sure that we're back with the contractor to make sure that the vendor's okay with it. So we'll have to pull it and consider it for the meeting on the 17th.
Mayor.
Yes.
Aaron, are those changes things that we should be aware of as a council, or are they just?
They're more technical changes in nature.
Thank you.
Specifically to make it reference in greater detail the development agreement.
Okay, because we were prepared to move ahead with that tonight, but we cannot.
Yes,
Okay.
correct, Mayor.
All right. The next item is called to the public. Again, do we have any speaker cards? Try again.
Ed Stizza.
Thank you. I'll just remind you, when you come up, please let us know what city or town you're from, but not your actual address. Thanks.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, staff, council, and residents of Fountain Hills. So, I apologize, I was still writing some of this back there, but can anybody confirm what, who, where caused the blasting last week? And there seems to be some confusion. So, and without legitimate answers, at least any that I've heard. I mean, everybody assumes that. Everybody assumed that it was in Adaro Canyon. So the communications director confirmed that, supposedly, or at least the town of Fountain Hills on the website or on social media. So is there anybody that can answer that question specifically?
This really isn't on the agenda, but I just will let you know that we have not been able to confirm where the source of that was. We do not believe it occurred in town. We believe it was in one of the neighboring communities, like at a quarry.
So that damage has caused, or I mean, those blasting instances has caused damage to several residences there. So it would certainly be nice to know where it came from. So hopefully somebody can get on that and answer it, you know. So seems to be a legitimate concern. Even Mayor Dickey had posted something on there. So I'm sure everybody read it, and I won't repeat it. So, but if you can answer that for the members of the community, that would be great. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We have our consent agenda. Unless you want to take something off, could I get a motion, please?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Our first item is our consideration and possible action on our budget. Grady?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and the public who are here tonight. One of the most important actions that the council takes each year is the consideration and adoption of its annual budget and capital improvement program. Before you is a budget that started basically last fall with the department directors submitting their requests, plus considerable review on the part of the finance director and myself of those requests. And then we also had our council retreat where there was quite a bit of input that was received from the mayor and council on their strategic priorities for the next fiscal year. And so we started back in February with the council, and we've had a number of meetings with the council. And then we also had a public open house that we had prior to the council having their budget workshop just before this meeting. It was earlier in the month, correct? So basically budgeting is basically a spending plan that the council puts together that, that identifies the top priorities and strategic issues that they're trying to address over the next 12 months, and that's what you're going to see tonight. We have condensed it to be able to get through it in a little bit less time than what we've done in the past. With that, I'll turn it over to our finance director, David Pock, who will be giving you a presentation on it.
Great. Thank you, Mayor and Council. As Grady said, we're adopting the tentative budget tonight. This is all information that you'd seen before, except for these first couple slides. So hopefully we'll be able to get through them a little quicker. Let me know if you have any questions along the way. So first of all, just an update on our TPT collections for the current fiscal year. We're doing very well. We've collected $12.8 million in TPT so far. That's through the end of March. We don't have the April numbers yet. We had 12.1 budgeted, so as you can see, we're about 700,000 above what we had thought we were going to have. Each of the categories below is broken down. You can see construction's a little bit lower than what we anticipated. Same with real estate, but real estate's very, very close. The two that I want to point out, I think I pointed them out last time, is the restaurant and bars and the services category. Done very well. We owe a lot to our town businesses and residents that patronize those businesses. So, any questions on the TPT?
That first total, that's also to date, right?
Correct.
Okay, so the 12.8, the 12.1 is not for the whole year, it's through March.
Just the first 3 quarters.
Thank
correct.
you.
All right, so then the last time as the town manager mentioned that we spoke about the budget was a proposed budget at the budget workshop. I just put together this slide to show you changes that have been made to that proposed budget so that you didn't have to go through and try and find each thing that had changed along the way. The first bullet point is a mistake that I made. It was something that I should have called out during the proposed budget. The amounts for the proposed 4% increase, cost of living increase, was shown in each of the departments as far as the totals. I just didn't call it out specifically as far as what was included there. So I wanted everybody to be aware of that. The next bullet point was quite a surprise. At the budget workshop, I had mentioned that we hadn't received the league estimates yet. Received them that Thursday, and they were quite a bit higher than what I was expecting. So the state shared sales tax and the state shared income tax were quite a bit higher, made up a majority of that $1.2 million that you see there. Most of it was from the income tax that was collected in 2020, so calendar year 2020. If you remember the COVID pandemic, DOR and the IRS had extended deadlines for filing. So that year there were actually 2 different dates that they collected taxes. A lot of that rolled in to that estimate that you see there. So, also we increased the contingency in the special revenue fund. That's basically because of the infrastructure bill and the possibility that the town could receive some grants from that bill. In case we do, we need the budget authority to use it. Obviously, if it's not received, it doesn't get used. And that's in the special revenues fund, so it doesn't affect our general fund. However, with those last 2 bullet items, it did increase the overall budget number by $5.4 million. As you know, we have increased revenues of $1.2 million. We had to offset that in the general fund by increasing our contingency number. So, we also have a carryover from this year's CIP that we're going to carry over into next year with your approval. That's $100,000 for the Shea Boulevard widening. That's designed Doesn't look like they're going to have that completely finished by the end of this year, and some of that will have to move over into next year. That doesn't increase the budget for the capital fund. It'll just reduce the contingency that we had planned for that fund. And also, during the proposed budget, I had shown that the safe routes to schools in the capital projects fund, a little bit more thought about that. We moved it out of the capital projects fund and into the streets because those specific items don't have projects. They're studies to see what projects could be done. And without having a project to tie it to, it shouldn't really be in the capital projects fund. Any questions on those items?
Yeah, maybe I'm getting confused. How much do we have total for streets?
Streets, as far as the fund balance for streets,
Yeah.
or how much?
Fund balance.
I believe we were right. Going to call a friend. Hold on one second.
Well, and David, you actually have, you have the street fund, I thought, in this
Yeah, it's probably in the
later in.
presentation.
Not the fund balance, though.
Not the
I
fund
just have
balance,
the
okay.
budgeted amounts, so.
That's all right.
Yeah, it's not going to be a large fund balance at the end of this fiscal year because a lot of that does get used each year. So I can get that for you, though. Any other questions? All right, I promise I'm not going to ask for questions after each slide because now we're going to go a little faster. All of these bullet items you've seen before, so. Again, the tentative budget book is available on the town's website. I checked the link. It does work. It does go to the book this time. Again, budget authority is not the same as fund balance. If we don't meet our revenue projections, then we must reduce contingency and expenditures to maintain our fund balance. The absolute maximum for the town for next year is recommended at $46.1 million total budget across all funds. The final budget will be adopted on June 7th can go below that number, depending if there's recommended changes, but it can't go above that number.
Yeah, how does that compare with last year?
I thought I had that summary in here. And it will be in the general fund, so if you give me a couple slides.
That's fine.
All right, so as far as revenue assumptions, again, all the same bullet points. How we come up with our revenue estimates, remaining conservative. We don't include things that aren't finished yet, and then our state shared revenue. All right. So as far as the general fund, general operating fund for the town, this you can see this year compared to next year. We did have a 9.4% increase from this year to next year. A lot of that, again, is contingency, however, so it's not operating budget per se. It's just the contingency to maintain balanced funds. So you can see the big difference in this one, the intergovernmental revenue, that's where all the state shared revenues reside. You can see that it had quite a bit of an increase. The licenses and permits was down. We discussed this at the proposed budget meeting, mainly due to construction activity. So this year we had 22.7% in the general fund for budget, and next year we have 24.8%. I do break it down just a little bit here too, as far as that contingency number. Obviously, with the inflation that we're experiencing right now, we might be spending some more than what we're anticipating, and that could cause us to use contingency if we're receiving revenues as we're expected. Contingencies included in the general government department within the general fund. Provides budget authority for increased operating costs and/or unforeseen expenditures only if expected revenues are received. And as far as next year, that contingency number is $4.4 million. So if you take the contingency numbers out of this year and next year, you can see we have about $700,000 increase this year, or going into next year.
I appreciate you pointing that out, because the, you know, with all the care money, the relief money and such, it looks like a jump, but in reality, this is the real number right here, and contingencies are just that. And also, again, what we approve as the top is the top, so it doesn't mean we have to do every project or do everything or spend everything that's here. It just, it's sort of a cushion going forward, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes, Councilman, Vice Mayor.
To that point, I'm just wondering, we've got a lot of projects in here we may or may not do. Are we spending a lot of time by our employees and cost by passing a budget that we don't think are essential items that may not be done? I'm just making a point here. I don't know that all these things should be passed in this budget necessarily if we're not going to do them. And then it was mentioned once before that we could always just cancel a contract. When you get that far down the line, though, a lot of time and effort and money has been spent to get a contract, and then if we do cancel the contract, we've wasted some effort behind that. So I just want to make that point and say, hey, is it something that we should consider bringing something back mid-year and seeing where we are with the cost of inflation, supply chain, and other issues that are going to affect this budget?
Absolutely, we talked about this, and Grady can explain.
Right. So, Vice Mayor, you bring up a really good point, and this had been discussed both at a staff level, and then the mayor had asked me about it as well. And so what I would suggest, because you're right, there's a lot of time and involvement in trying to get these solicitations or requests for proposals out. And also there's cost and expense on the part of the businesses that have to prepare and submit those. So what I would suggest is when we get to the actual capital, or if you have tonight, if there's any items, any projects that there were some concerns about, what we could do is we can come back before you before we actually go and do an RFP, just to check in with you on those ones that you identified tonight. And we'll keep track of those, and when it's time to check in with the council and get direction from you, we'll do that before we go through the effort of trying to develop an RFP. Does that make sense?
Fair enough, yeah. All right. So then just to take a look at the supplements that were presented, these remain the same from the proposed budget. I wanted to go through the slides real quick, ask if there were any questions about any of them.
Alan?
Probably not related to this slide, but how much have we put aside, we've gone through this, put aside for the liner, and how much are we putting aside this year for the liner?
So right now, as of our discussions last year at this time, we transferred in $1 million specifically for the liner, or to be held for the liner in the Facilities Reserve Fund. It was transferred this year. It's sitting there. It's waiting. Next year, next month, when we come to do the final budget, I'll also have a slide on suggested transfers for approval for next fiscal year. And at this point, and as the time of the proposed budget, I had recommended that another $1 million be put into the Facilities Reserve Fund for that purpose. Doesn't mean that it absolutely has to stay for that purpose. That would be up to council direction.
It won't surprise you, I've made it clear in the past that we don't know when we're going to need a liner. We may need to go to a bond for a liner. I'd rather have $2 million added to the to take out of that fund for roads, which is what we really need, especially neighborhood roads.
Right.
I just want to get that.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I will say that this current year, we did transfer $2 million of the general fund savings from the CARES Act at that point into the streets fund for pavement maintenance. There will be another recommended $2 million this for fiscal year 23 from the ARPA savings as well. But that absolutely can be.
Will that give us $4 million?
A total of just about 4.6, I believe.
That's pretty good. It's gone up. Yeah. Thank you.
It's a big chunk. It gives Director Weldy quite a bit of work to do.
It was extra $2 million, then most of the 4 million, and then next year when we get the other 4 million too. But also the liner money, that's all part of our, at least I understand, of our facilities or the set aside, so it doesn't have to go for the liner. It's just, so when you say we wanted to put 1 million towards that, that is it, and then another 500,000 in addition. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was just going to echo what you just said. Thank you.
Wait before we slide away from that slide. I just want to make sure and get it on the record. I've talked to Grady, but I watched the October 6th Fountain Hills Unified School District Board meeting where they specifically talk about the inspection of their facilities, one of which is the Four Peaks Elementary School. I watched it, I took really good notes, and I also read the meetings of the notes. I just wanted to make it official on record that I am very concerned about how much money this building is going to cost to keep it up. Grady, I'll let you speak to that,
Sure.
But the words used were end of life and major gut renovation requirements kind of thing. So don't get me wrong, I love the Biz Hub. I am a part of their advisory board. I'm very pro it, but my concern is getting stuck with a lemon.
Right. So I've had a very good discussion with the school superintendent, and the understanding is if the town council were to give authorization to have the town enter into a lease agreement with the school district for the operation of the Biz Hub, the school district would be on the hook for all the major maintenance, the roof, the AC units, all that. The town would have minor costs, and we'd have a threshold of between $50,000 and $75,000 that we would not have to exceed each year on any maintenance costs. We are having an internal meeting next Monday, and we're going to be discussing some of those costs. Right now, there's been some recent activities related to that, to the Biz Hub, that I'm kind of questioning in my mind. And so anyways, if the council were to adopt this budget tonight and the Biz Hub is in there, and then there's a recommendation not to go forward with the Biz Hub, the dollars that are here will just not be utilized or expended. And so I don't want to get into too much detail, but you bring up a really good point. Now, when the school district is talking about with its facilities reserve study and how much has to go back into the building, they're looking at school standards and what is required under state law of what they have to do in order to maintain a building. Totally different requirement than what it would be used for what is being used today. I will be the first to agree with you, though, that the condition is not a very good condition of a building. The school superintendent would also agree with that. So those are all being taken into consideration before a formal recommendation would be coming back to the council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To piggyback off of Councilperson Grzybowski's comments, I've been told that there's a comprehensive engineering report and an inspection report about all the things that are wrong with the school and everything. I have not seen a copy of that report. That report hasn't been, to the best of my knowledge, been made available to the council. So if that report does exist, I would like that report so that I could personally review it. And I think the council members should also get the same copy.
We'll be bringing that forward to the council on the decision, but we'll be happy to forward that on to you. It is a public record, and we'll forward that on to you, council member.
Thank you. I know that we've talked about this and about what the usage of that building could be. I would look at, we did the Business Advisors Business Hub for many, many years and supported them and didn't have to do with the building. So I think both of those things can exist where we may not need the building in order to continue to support that idea of the incubator. So there's a lot of discussion to be had, but I guess just almost like everything else here, if it's in here, if it's something we've expressed anything about, the shade structure or whatever, that those will be things that before we moved forward, we'd have a lot more information. Thank you.
All right. So the total for non-personnel ongoing supplements, the previous page plus this one, counting the offsets, $259,000. As far as one-time non-personnel supplements, another $416,000. And then the personnel supplements, which we discussed as well last time, at $222,000. So you can see just with the supplements alone, that makes up a larger number than our $700,000 increase that we're talking about. That's because other expenses were reduced as well. So we had a net change of $700,000. All right, as far as general fund expenditures, these numbers should, the bottom line numbers should look very similar to what you saw on the revenue side. That's because we have to have a balanced budget in the general fund. Everything's got to match, so they are. All right, and then we're going to take a quick look at the other major funds. First, the streets fund. The overall summary, you can see that the current fiscal year's revenues and expenditures are a lot more even. That is because for next year, we haven't decided on a transfer yet from the general fund, and that will make up for that $2 million difference there you see. As far as revenues, you can see the different breakdown. Again, the transfer is not shown at this point in fiscal year 23. If the council decided to do another transfer of $2 million, then that, obviously that budgeted amount would increase to $6 million. I will add though real quick, just before I confuse anybody, we don't budget for transfers. Council basically approves the transfers. That's because we don't want to double count expenditures.
Question?
Yes.
David, the investment earnings is based on what?
Hope at this point.
I mean, interest rates are about to skyrocket.
They will get better. Unfortunately, as far as bond markets, when interest rates rise in a bond market, what you're holding at lower interest rates tend to lose a little value along the way. Nobody's wanting to buy low interest stuff. It's rough. We don't have a lot of investment earnings for the current fiscal year, and that's obviously, we're just hopeful figures at this point.
Now, is that based on the bond market? Where do we have the money parked?
So right now, we have about $19 million with the Arizona Treasurer. That's basically slightly better than a money market or leaving it parked to the bank. We're not making tons of money there, but it is liquid money, and we were able to get that when we need it. There's another $13 million that we have invested with PFM, investment managers, and that's a lot of government bonds and that sort of thing, some commercial paper. That we do earn a little bit more, but it's tied up and not quite as easily accessible. It's kind of stair-stepped as far as maturities and that sort of thing. Obviously, the things that they're buying now are at the higher interest rate, so we'll make a little bit more. They're about to go up.
Yeah, what I'm reading is
well.
likely to have 2 half-point increases over the next couple of months. So
Absolutely. Well, from what I'm seeing is they're still planning on trying to get a total of 10 interest rate hikes in this calendar year. They've already had a few tomorrow. The expectation is that it'll be raised a half a point, which hasn't happened since, I can't remember the year, maybe 2007, something like that, just before the housing market and that sort of thing took a dive.
So you're not planning on spending the money yet?
No, no. No, and this is actually, these investment earnings projections are reduced from what we had for the current fiscal year. So luckily, it's not a number that's going to have effect, being able to do a street or something like that. So, all right. So as far as expenditures, here's as far as the other expenses, basically is, as far as the streets fund, is pavement maintenance. So we are expecting to do the same amount of work next year as we are doing this year.
Same amount of work, that's all maintenance, I presume?
Yes.
Is it all on arterials? Is any of it neighborhood streets?
That's a great question, and I'd have to look at the Public
I'll-
Works Director
I'll,
for an answer.
I'll go ahead and respond to it. It's a combination. So as you recall, we went through a pavement management analysis, I believe it was in 2018. And as part of that analysis, it did a ranking of our streets. And so basically, those that are failing, that are like in really bad shape, tend to be the ones that we let go to the point where because of not having enough resources, and then we'll go ahead and redo those. So it is always each year, it's a combination. Obviously, the highest priority are the arterials. We're going to be going into doing some preservative treatments on our Shea and Saguaro, the most recent major arterial reconstruction projects that we've had. That's probably going to be close to $1 million or so just for that. And then we're going to, based on this software that goes through and analyzes our streets and the conditions, we'll be able to bring forth a contract to the council, and you'll see what streets are going to be done.
I know we've talked about this before, the coating of Saguaro and Shea, $1 million. Do we have any idea how long that lasts?
But I'll let the Public Works Director come up, and that's a technical question. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, council member, ideally, the preservative seal, based on weather conditions, should push us out another 5 years. Oftentimes, it'll be slightly less, but we anticipate at least 5 years from this treatment. And in fact...
And that's not to say that the street will hold up another 5 years. It's just that the treatment will last for 5 years before you have to redo it.
Both Shea and Saguaro are in relatively good condition, as they are mostly new. So this crack filling and preservative seal will prolong their longevity by an additional 5 years, but they have 25 plus years left in their life.
Justin, this just reminds me, I've been asked about pavement miles, and I know, it's hard to put a finger on it because some of it is we've been redoing, but also a lot of preservation and, chip sealing and all of those things. Is there any idea what miles this might translate to when it comes to 4.9 million? I mean, I know it's potholes and curbing and all these other things too, so is there any sort of comparison?
And it's an excellent question, Madam Mayor. We won't know the total distance or the lane miles we're able to accomplish until the projects have been established, and then we get pricing on that either through bidding or through our existing contracts. If I can reference this year, we are going to accomplish about 6 lane miles plus or minus for locals and collectors. Obviously, this year we are going to do Shea and Saguaro before the end of June. So there's, I'm not going to do center line miles because that one's a little bit more challenging, but about, just under 7 lane miles is what will be accomplished with those two.
And I just wanted to add, while these are general rules of thumb, a lot of it has to do with the streets that are being replaced. So for instance, pre-incorporation streets that didn't have good base to begin with, or it's going to cost those more per linear foot or more per linear mile than what you would see other streets. So the money doesn't go quite as far sometimes.
All right, so on to the Capital Projects Fund, the final major fund. As you can see, for next year, we have a total of 8.16 million budgeted overall. Our revenues, that green bar, obviously is money coming in next year. We will have fund balance of about 7.7 is what I'm guessing at this point. I'll have a little bit more revised number next at the final budget. We're working on closing out projects at this point and seeing where we're going to end up. So as far as The capital, oh, I'm sorry, 4.4 million as far as ending fund balance for this year, with excess revenues over expenditures from the general fund expected to be about 3.5, and then our TPT sales tax of 1.1, development fees 275,000, making it 9.3 total available for projects next year. The recommended projects are the 7.7. And those are listed here. Again, we talked about these during the budget workshop as well as the CIP workshop that preceded it. A total of 4.9 for public works requests. And then as far as park requests, 2.7 million. For a total 7.6 basically for projects, and then we have some contingency as well, and some funding that's going to be coming from the parks development fees.
So, Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to just say this would be your opportunity if you wanted to identify the projects that we discussed before that you may want us to come back and check in with you before we proceed with RFPs.
I think just judging from our previous discussions, the overlook, the roundabout, the shade structure over at Centennial Circle would all be ones that we would want to see back. Wayfinding signs, were we okay with that? Pretty much? Yeah. Is there anything else that jumps out that you want to make sure that we would have more discussion before we went out for RFPs and such?
Those do seem to be a good memory. Those were the ones that seemed to have the most discussion, I recall, from the council.
Yes, Alan?
Am I missing it? I don't think it's part of capital projects. Where is that shade structure?
It's right here.
It's the last item,
Oh,
Centennial Pavilion.
Okay, thank you.
I should have put Rachel's umbrella in.
Yeah, right. Big picture of her next to it.
But yeah, I don't think there was too much else. But again, you would make sure that we wouldn't
That's
step
correct.
out too far on any of those.
So what we'll do is we'll check in with you and definitely get the council, if need be, to vote on those before going forward on a solicitation for a request for proposal.
I guess I don't understand the process. Why would we wait? Why would we wait?
Well, you didn't vote on these when we were, or when we had the council budget workshop on the Capitol, and it was not clear from the staff perspective if there was a majority that had a feeling one way or the other. So if you wanted to tonight, you can actually vote on these individually, but I was trying to keep it simple. And when you say, why would I would wait when we are into the new fiscal year, and when we were getting close to wanting to go ahead and start doing the paperwork and get ready on an RFP, we'd come to you before we'd do that.
Well,
it would save effort, is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay, I'm willing to wait, but you know how I feel about both the shade structure and the the design of the roundabout, and we can do it whenever you want.
Okay.
Let me just put a little bit what Grady was talking about is there's some things we don't know yet. There's billions of dollars coming to Arizona in infrastructure bill. Once that kind of starts to trickle down, we could apply, and we are applying for projects for that. I also wanted to mention, and I know that we talk about the overlook, that I've had some input from some businesses, and we're going to be having a meeting soon. And I would just like the opportunity to hear what their thoughts are that are downtown, if they think it's worthwhile, if there would be some support for it. And then as far as the roundabout goes, if that's looked at as a safety infrastructure project, that could be something that we could get paid for too. So that's why if there's no harm in keeping it now, then maybe later we'll have more knowledge and then we'll know whether to take it off. Thank you.
And just for clarification, if the projects don't go forward, the money stays in the capital fund and it's there available for use, for future projects.
All right. Now I made it to my question slide. So that's it. Congratulations, you've survived your
Thank
last
you.
tentative budget. Councilman.
All right. Do we have any speaker cards on the budget? Any questions, more discussion?
Good work, thank you.
Thank you. The motion is on 96.
So would you move to approve Resolution 2022-18? Is that it?
Yep.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for all your work. Next item, Grady?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Development Services Director John Wesley is going to be giving a staff presentation on considerations regarding amendments to the group home regulations. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wesley.
Just want to remind you, too, this was the hearing, so I don't have to start the hearing again because we continued it, but then when we're done and we have the public input again, we will close the hearing and then move on. Thanks.
Okay. Mayor and Council, good evening. Try to move through this quickly because we have discussed quite a bit of it before, but giving you an update on where we are and some of the questions that you still had from our last meeting. So again, the Planning and Zoning Commission, after extensive review, did make a recommendation to the Town Council with regard to amendments to our group home regulations. You held your hearing, began that hearing on April the 5th. At that meeting, you were able to give staff some direction on quite a number of the items. I think we had 16, 17 items on the list, and 11 or 12 of them you were able to give us direction on. So we were able to amend the ordinance based on that direction. That amended ordinance with a strike through so you could see those differences was in the packet. So if there were anything we got incorrect from that previous discussion, please let me know. But I went back and re-listened to the discussion, so hopefully we got it all correct there. So what I found after that was that there were 5 items that the council wanted to discuss further and have a little bit further information on. Those are listed on this page, and we'll discuss each one individually as we go forward here. So I've ordered these in what I think may be the easier ones to the harder ones, but I know they're all hard ones. So we'll go with this order that I have. So one has to do with the unannounced inspections. Section 513B lists some items that would be part of the registration. Number 2 on that list includes a statement that the applicant would agree to allow town officials to enter the premises for unannounced inspections to inspect for land use violations, including the number of occupants. This type of inspection is not required for any other land use that we do, and so we find that a little bit different. I reviewed a number of other jurisdictions for their ordinances to see if anybody else is requiring this. The closest I found was that Apache Junction ordinance does include an option for an annual inspection, but don't know that they do that on a regular basis, and it wasn't an unannounced inspection. It was just to check against the checklist from the state. And then Tempe does do an annual fire inspection.
Okay, so we do a fire inspection, right?
Right, annual fire inspection.
We do that, and does not include the option for an annual inspection. The state can do unannounced annual, or any inspection, correct?
Correct, that's my understanding.
Okay, and they are the licensing body.
Correct. With the towns, that is really just a registration of that license.
Just want to put a little finer point on it. Only the state can do that, correct?
Only the state can do the unannounced inspection? Or? Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or comment with that one? If not, we can.
I just have a question about the process. So as far as what you already wrote up, did you, like, when we get to the point where we're actually amending it or not amending it and passing something, would this be something that would have to be removed? Is that in the ordinance right now?
Mayor, no, what is in your packet is an ordinance that it just includes the changes from the last meeting.
Okay.
But I think if you're, this is a distinct sentence in that section, so it'd be very easy for the council to say, you know, we approve the ordinance with the deletion of that sentence, if that's what you want to do, or you don't, if you want to keep
Okay.
it.
And
So I think it'd be very
Aaron is
easy,
nodding, so,
to
okay.
move forward this evening, unless we, really change things around a lot
Okay.
by just coming back and handling these each one in the motion.
Got it, thanks.
Okay?
Yeah.
Oh,
Mayor, Council, I was just going to add that it may well be that after we discuss whatever number of changes the council wishes to see or needs to take place, we might take a couple of minutes to just make sure that our strike-throughs all look good and then reconvene for the council to hopefully adopt the ordinance.
okay.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Item 2 on the list was inspection, or insurance. So again, section 5.13B, listing the items to be provided at registration. Number 5 on the list, I won't read this whole thing this time, but it requires the amounts of liability insurance and the waiver of subrogation for the town. As we discussed this in the past, we've pointed out that it could be necessary for the town to receive this, is to make sure these businesses are being run properly. And then if so, are these amounts appropriate, and is the waiver necessary? So that was some of the previous discussion. It was pointed out from some of the public that Prescott, Phoenix, and Mesa have insurance requirements. In investigating those, it was discovered that was based on, excuse me, their ordinances when they were licensing structured sober living homes, and applied just to those. And that was prior to the state passing their legislation in 2019. And the jurisdictions, either those provisions sunset based on the state legislation, or they've actually repealed them. So they don't have those requirements actively in their ordinances today. As I look through the other ordinances, I did not see any within their group home, assisted living provisions that any were requiring insurance. We also have a concern that if we had this, if it would actually be enforceable.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Just to be clear, any city that had it before the state law changed has either repealed it or sunset it?
Correct.
Thank you.
Separation distance, section 5.13A lists a basic requirement for homes, and that includes a separation distance as recommended by the P&Z. They put in a half mile, or 2,640 feet. This distance is measured straight line property to property. The overall goal of the code is to allow for these homes but not create an overconcentration. And so that's what we're looking for, is what distance would achieve that goal. Currently, in our existing ordinance that's in effect today, our separation distance is 1,200 feet. In the jurisdictions that I looked at, the greatest distance separation that I found was 1,320, or a quarter mile. You can see the communities that have that. Next was the number of jurisdictions similar to Fountain Hills that have the 1,200, and then some that were smaller with Oro Valley, Prescott, Cave Creek, and then a couple that had no separation requirements in Flagstaff and Sedona that I could find.
Just want to emphasize, so of all the jurisdictions you looked at, 1320 was the most, is that correct?
That's the greatest distance I could find in any Arizona jurisdictions.
Thank you.
That I looked at. Any other questions or comments with that? See, I don't think I have another slide on that. I guess I do have one more slide. And so again, to some of the things we looked at before, when we looked at where we change a 100-block designation in town, it's approximately every 600 to 700 feet. We did a review of all the block lengths in town. We measured every block length and divided that by the number of blocks, and came up with an average block length of 560 feet approximately. So if you use those as kind of some guides for separation, that might be helpful. There's been some concern about some of the environmental impacts you get from the way people have experienced some of these homes. Some of those environmental impacts could be addressed by addressing those specific codes rather than addressing it this way. And then at the last meeting, there was some talk about, well, current is the 1,200. P&Z had recommended the 2,460. Maybe we cut that in half. So I just provided that number just as another point of reference. To 1830 would be that number if the council wanted to go that way.
I just want to, I think, emphasize, based upon my knowledge of this, that 1320 is the most for any jurisdiction.
That's the most I found.
And this says 1830.
Correct.
And I know some people have said, go to court, don't worry about it. but I think this may be a red flag, so I think we have to be careful.
Just to make it clear, the distances between property lines, correct?
Property line to property line.
So, we were discussing the canyon aspect and such, and this would stop anything from being like back to back or anything like that.
That's correct.
There would be,
because
definitely
it's
be buffers.
That circle around, so most canyons aren't that wide.
yeah,
If they
like-
were, then it probably would take care of it. There's, the contrast is in Prescott, where they do measure theirs along a street. And by doing that, you could have something back to back, because they could go around the block and be there. So that's not what we're talking about. That's not the way it is today. Moving on. Next item is a number of residents. Section 1.12 of the zoning ordinance provides definitions. Here in this section, we are amending what we've used before in terms of having a group home designation definition and change it to community residences, and then subdividing that into two types, family residences and transitional residences, excuse me. The recommendation from the P&Z is that the family residences would be a maximum of 8, including staff, and that the transitional would be 6, including staff. Currently, our ordinance is 10, not including staff, so all the existing homes out there have that potential to be that size. Again, as I looked at the other jurisdictions, found, excuse me, found one or two cities here that I did not see any cap to the number. Prescott has 12. You can see the number there of 10 excluding staff, and then a few of 10 including staff. And there are 3 jurisdictions that do set a limit of 5. Although there's a caveat with Gilbert. Both Chandler and Tempe do set theirs at 5. They do have their waiver procedures that can allow for more than that, but that's what their standard is. Gilbert is 5 limit when it is not licensed through the state, but if they are licensed through the state, then it can go up to 10. Any questions on that one?
I'm more comfortable seeing that there's a couple with 6, and then as long as transitional can be treated differently from what we call more permanent, then the 8 and the 6 seems like something that would be totally allowable.
Yes, Mayor, as we have looked at that and thought about that, when we're talking about the transitional homes, those are the people staying there typically for a shorter period of time, so there's more turnover, and so there's maybe a little bit more impact on the neighborhood, less stability for the neighborhood, so forth with the transitional. So we think there is justification there for some consideration of the difference. So the last item then would be waivers. The terminology here has been a little bit confusing, and so tried to address that by just calling it a waiver. There might be some other terms to use, modification or adjustment, but we believe that it is important to have that option spelled out in the code for a waiver or deviation, just like we do variances for other parts of the code, so we can consider unique situations and address them specifically. The ordinance as provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission did include a section on those. There's some concerns about how that was worded, how it might be implemented, and so they took that provision out of the ordinance that was recommended to you. As I've looked at, again, the other codes, found that most jurisdictions do provide for some type of waiver. And so we would suggest that we put something back in, but with some changes from what went to the P&Z. We are suggesting some kind of waiver committee. This is one option that's on here. Town manager, development service director, a member of one of our boards. We could change that in any number of ways. 1 staff person and 2 board members would be another way that could be done. Other citizen might be appointed. But we think something like a 3-member board of some kind, so it's not just one person, but we don't want to get unwieldy by having too many, so a 3-person. Then there's the potential, if we wanted to have an appeal from there. It doesn't have to have one, but put that out there as a possibility. And then compared to what we provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission, beefed up the language a little bit in terms of the standards to make it clear that you can't just come in and say, I want it because I want it. We need real information, documentation to justify that these people would look at and review in order to grant a waiver to the standards.
The the list there, the bullets, was going to depend on what they were asking.
Correct.
What
Right,
the
so,
waiver
yeah,
is for.
right. So some of it
But,
might
you know,
not
having
apply.
it defined as much as possible. And then I think having the three-person committee available, we talked a little bit about that in the past. Do you have anything to, thank you, David?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I personally would like to see the town manager drop from this process. I believe it should be the Development Service Director, a representative from the Board of Adjustments, and a representative from Planning and Zoning, since they have intimate knowledge of planning and zoning in the town.
Okay, so that would be still three people, so that's good. And then probably the appeal to town council might not be necessary because there's going to be a natural progression to this anyway. So we'd have the Board of Appeals chair, P&Z chair. Does it have to be chair? Probably makes sense, but I guess it doesn't have to be. And then development director, and then that would be it. And then afterwards, whichever way it went, then where would they go after that? They could either just, accept it. If it was accepted, then that would be the end of it, right?
Right. If
Okay.
the accommodation were granted, that would be the end. And I suppose the language could be really whatever we want it to be for that group of three, but either the chair or his or her designee, or simply a member, however we want to do it.
Okay.
So then if the chair's not available, you're not bound, to have to do it by.
If an individual were to buy a home and get state certification, but they said, we can't get the return on investment we need to allow more people. Is that appealable for a waiver?
So the simple answer is yes. If they feel like they need more than, whether it's the 8 or the 6, depending on which type of home is, yes, they can request a waiver to that, but they'll need more justification than, no, this just isn't working out for us financially. They have to, again, I just summarized it here, but there's the 5 criteria that would be looked at carefully by the 3-member committee to ensure they really have a justification and not just a desire.
Not just a financial
Right, not just a
justification.
financial, right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I thought we were going to reconsider the appeal of the town council, maybe delete that. And Aaron, do we need to include the appeal to judicial type? Do we name that or just don't do anything or?
Yeah, we certainly could, but a denial of an accommodation would be something that a person could take for a judicial remedy anyway. Yeah.
And to Alan's point too, as far as somebody buying a house and starting something new, they would know these rules were in place. Which brings up the idea of grandfathering. And are we going to talk about that?
Mayor, I did not include that in the presentation. It was in the staff report since it wasn't actually an ordinance proposal at the time, so it's not here. But so there are specific provisions in the ordinance that this would fall under with how we treat any time we change a code. You have a legally approved use going on property, and we allow it to continue as long as it doesn't change within certain parameters. So that's what we would anticipate here. There have been some questions about, well, what if somebody owns a home, a group home of some kind, and then they're tired of it, so they sell that to somebody else, and a new operator comes in. That new operator is going to need to get a new license. And when they get a new license, they have to register that license. And so that new license would need to then follow the new code. And so as we've talked about that a little bit, it may be helpful to add a paragraph in the code to make sure that's clear. And we can sure do. That's one of the things that we can get back to council if you want to do that here. As the attorney talked about, if you take a break, we could get that language.
And I would
put
also
together.
add that, you called this in the past, when we talked about places where the zoning got changed around them, it's called legal non-conforming use.
Correct.
And just to point out, it's not legal to reduce those uses for people that are there already. So we kind of saw a little bit about that when we talked about parking and some of these other items over the years where they had a certain kind of zoning. So we change the zoning, but we can't change the value or the use of the property as long as it's that same person and they don't change it
Correct.
a lot. So this would just be something that we already have in place for a town?
Yes.
Okay, David?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just as a point of clarification, and the town attorney can jump in, I received numerous emails from residents who are like, don't worry about getting sued, pass it, let's see what happens down the road. I think as a point of clarification, it's important to note that someone who seeks a remedy or a waiver first has to come to the town and request the waiver, and then be denied the waiver in order for them to legally go into court and take it from there. So I think it's important to note that you can't skip that process. If I'm talking out of turn, Aaron, you can't skip that process of coming to the town for a waiver and go directly to court, because if you go to court, the first thing the court's going to ask is, did you seek a remedy within the town? And they're not going to ask that?
No, absolutely.
Oh, you're shaking your head no.
No, that's going to be the first, mayor and council, that will be the first thing they say is, if the town finds itself in that situation, the defense is, well, we don't know whether they would have gotten an accommodation or not because they never asked, right? And so the court's going to send that back to work through the administrative process. It's called exhaustion of administrative remedies, and you stated that very well.
Okay. Just for everybody out there, we can't just jump right to, well, I'm going to sue. You first have to seek a remedy within the town. Then if you don't like what you hear, then you can escalate it from there. But there's no jumping the system.
And Mayor and Councilmember, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is one of the main reasons to have this in the code, because if we don't have it in the code, then they are jumping straight to the courts.
In addition, under Section B, application requirements, number 8, it says the applicant shall attest that they will provide all evidence permissible by code and authority having jurisdiction necessary in response to a code enforcement inquiry. And I would like to ask that in particular occupancy logs be omitted, because we don't require occupancy logs, and I don't think we're allowed that information. Correct, Aaron?
So Mayor and council, I want to make sure that I'm looking at the right section. It looks like it's page 5.
Yep.
Okay, we're talking about section 3. Okay. 8, the applicant shall, I see where you are. And Councilwoman, you take issue with the language, in particular occupancy logs? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say that leaving it or removing it probably doesn't make a material difference. I'd be fine with removing that last phrase, because we're still requiring an attestation that the applicant will provide all evidence permissible that we can get a hold of. So there's not necessarily a reason to make anything specific unless John sees a different basis for it.
Fine either way,
Okay.
'cause I agree that first phrase covers it.
Oh, that may well be. I've lost track of where in part of where we've been. So thank you. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought up, code enforcement, because that is still something that you can do with anything going on in town, where our code enforcement can go if it's litter or noise, or call MCSO if there's something else going on that needs attention. So since the state is the licensing body, and they are the ones that can do inspections, and they require the license, they can, so basically they're in charge of some of the enforcement that I think concerns some people, and then there are some things that we can do, and which we're doing now with these changes in our ordinance that are within the law. I wanted to also mention that some of the discussion we heard, and when David, when you were just mentioning going and getting sued and such, that we are part of a risk pool, and we are, and risk pools, we have the deductible and such, but it's not the same as it is the same, like you have health insurance, you have all kinds of insurance, and then there's all kinds of stipulations to that. If you enact something that's just blatantly not lawful, then the risk pool isn't going to necessarily defend you, or depending on who's doing charges against you. So it's just not as simple as saying it couldn't be any more than $10,000. And then in some cases, if it's a land use issue, there's a cap. of $1 million. So if it was more than $1 million, so it's not as simple and cut and dry as it might seem when you just kind of look stuff up, which I can understand doing, and we appreciate that because the information that we got from folks had us looking into things a little bit more and feeling like we have a lot more clarity about all this. So I want to thank you for that. Should I go
Mayor,
with?
Mayor, again.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank you for clarifying those issues. And the other point, I know, Aaron, you talked about it in the past, as far as if we were to lose this suit, a lot of times the biggest bill in such a thing is attorney's fees, and those aren't typically reimbursed in that kind of a scenario by the risk pool. You want to clarify that a little?
They may be, they may not be, depending on how the pool kind of interprets the policy, right? So I just, to the mayor's point and to your question, Councilman, without getting into the details, I can't get into them, but I just recently resolved a case for another municipal client. And that one happened to be one where the pool defended under reservation, they call it under a reservation of rights, which means that, you know, if they later determine that there was something amiss for which they shouldn't have provided coverage, that there will be sort of an indemnity obligation, right? And the pool in this instance very well may, and I believe will, exercise that right. So it's simply, to both of your points, it's not as straightforward. Insurance issues never are, as I think anyone who's ever tried to use insurance can appreciate.
Do we want to go to call the public now? Are you all ready for that? Okay. I think we'll do that, and then, well, I don't close the hearing until after they speak, right? Okay. So if we have call to the public, and then we can close the hearing and vote. Speaker cards?
First one is Mary Ann Sampson.
Thank you, everyone, for giving me a chance to speak tonight. I must admit, public speaking is not for me, and standing before you takes me completely out of my comfort zone. But this is so important that I felt that everyone needed to hear what I have to say. Most people don't believe in love at first sight, but I know it exists because I experienced it 4 times in my life. When I met my husband, when I first laid eyes on my 2 children, and the 4th time when I crossed a mountain range from Scottsdale into Fountain Hills. The beauty of this town totally took my breath away. We bought a house here, and after living in more locations that I can count, I felt like I finally had come home. That was 25 years ago. Due to job opportunities elsewhere, we had to leave a few times, but we held on to our home because we knew if we worked hard and saved our pennies, we would one day return. That day finally happened 2 months ago when we retired. After 15 years in New York, we were so excited to finally come back. But to our disappointment, it feels so different now. And I'm so sad to say that our beautiful house no longer feels like home. A home to me is a place where you feel totally at ease, where you feel comfortable, and when you feel safe. But due to lack of regulation for commercial businesses operating in residential neighborhoods, I no longer have any of those feelings. See, I happen to live right next door to one of these rehab homes. Homes in quotes because they don't even come close to resembling a home. Next door to me is a revolving door of different men all the time, spending their time watching my coming and going and every move. And it's very unnerving. I can no longer enjoy sitting outside without being watched and pestered with smoke and vaping from 10 grown men next door to me. And let's say I want to sell my home, and move, who would want to buy it? Who would want to live in a commercial zone? Because that is what my neighborhood has become. So I beg you, when you vote, please consider how it is living in my shoes next to one of these businesses. Thank you.
Ron Sampson.
Dear Madam Mayor, fellow council members, thank you for the opportunity to share with you our perspective on what my wife, Marianne, and I consider to be a defining issue for our town and its residents. My comments today follow an email letter that we sent to each of you on April 6th after attending last month's town council meeting. We'd like to acknowledge and thank yourself, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Grzybowski, for your thoughtful replies and your feedback. And I look forward to hearing perspectives from the rest of you. As my wife just described to you, living once again here in Fountain Hills now feels very different. Next door, vans with smoke-tinted windows arrive and depart frequently, almost clandestinely, multiple times a day. Each evening we see several men, often not the same, out on the deck overlooking our house. Seeing them makes me uncomfortable. I can't imagine how it makes my wife and daughter feel. We now live next door, as she said, to one of those sober living homes. A commercial, for-profit business and no longer a residential neighbor. And because drug and alcohol abuse are linked with higher probability to commit a crime, quite frankly, we don't feel safe in our home. When I speak of recovering addicts, I recognize the overwhelming majority of these men are good people who've had a bad break. And we fully support the concept of providing them an opportunity to get their life back on track. I also know that statistically, and with the constant turnover next door, we are now at a substantially higher risk of encountering someone who is going to commit a crime against us. So it is critically important to us that you, the town leadership, move forward to regulate these businesses, beginning with the adoption of Ordinance 2101. I cannot stress enough how important it is that the capacity limits proposed by planning and zoning are adopted as part of this ordinance, with no grandfather clause associated with this limit for these detox rehab center pop-ups, and couple that with the ability to inspect them without notice as an aid for law enforcement. Simply allowing these commercial businesses to operate in our residential neighborhoods is already more than a reasonable accommodation. Because of the increased crime risk associated with recovering drug and alcohol addicts, it also is essential that these businesses carry additional liability insurance. It's not a typical business. Please adopt the proposal put forward by Planning and Zoning. Madam Mayor, council members, it is imperative that you come together and correct this situation by enacting Ordinance 2101 and approving a version that restores the essence of our community. Thank you for listening.
Please refrain from applause. I'm asking you, please. Next.
Natalie Marston Salem.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. I will start by introducing myself again for those who may not remember. My name is Natalie Marston Salem. My husband, John Salem, and I are the owners of Fountain Hills Recovery. At last month's council meeting, I spoke about how our facility came to fruition because of the loss of my father, Maurice, a dedicated fire captain for nearly 30 years. Tonight, I would like to take the time to address the rumors, gossip, and misconceptions specifically about our facility and our 2 sober living homes within the town. We first opened and began serving our clients in late 2016. For many years, a lot of you probably didn't even know we existed in Fountain Hills because of the fact that the issues being raised are simply not accurate. Our 2 sober living homes are both licensed by the Arizona Department of Health, as well as ASRA, the Arizona Recovery Housing Association. Our inpatient and outpatient facilities are also licensed by the Arizona Department of Health and accredited by the Joint Commission, an organization that accredits healthcare organizations and programs, holding them to the highest standard of care. This is not a requirement, but something we feel is a necessity in order to provide the highest level of quality care for our clients. I would like to stress that our homes are not detox homes, as I have frequently seen them referred to on community social media pages. There are no detox services being offered or provided to clients. In order to be residents in our homes, clients are currently receiving therapeutic services daily in our clinical program at our facility overlooking the fountain. Our homes are staffed 24/7, and clients do not have access to their cell phones, nor do they have access to come and go in their personal vehicles. They are all in the care of our well-trained staff at all times. Our sober homes have not been the subject of any identifiable or substantiated criminal concerns. There have been no arrests, no property crimes, no graffiti, no destruction on public property, no noise ordinance complaints, no drug arrests, no public intoxication incidents, and no petty crimes associated with the sober living homes operated by Fountain Hills Recovery. In fact, there has not been any police interactions or code enforcement issues relating to such homes. Furthermore, none of our homes have been shut down by the state agency, as claimed by one member of the community. The claims from residents that drug paraphernalia found in the town belongs to our clients is absolutely false and unsubstantiated. Sadly, these are outright lies and falsehoods aimed at shedding a negative light on addiction treatment, sober living homes, and specifically our facility. I find it very disheartening and sad that there are those in this community who would go out of their way to rally against a facility that has done nothing but good for the community and changed people's lives, actually saved people's lives. I want to make it abundantly clear that this is not just a business to us. We are passionate about what we do and how we are able to help others change their lives and overcome their addiction. My husband and I are both at the facility every single day, overseeing the quality of care our clients receive and always looking for ways to improve and serve our clients to the best of our ability. I hope and pray for those of you who have been so openly against individuals seeking treatment in sober living homes in Fountain Hills, that you never have to experience having a loved one struggle with addiction. I am hopeful and optimistic these types of open conversations will allow us to have an open mind and some compassion to help those who are in need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, excuse me, what town do you and your
Sorry?
husband reside in? What town does you and your husband reside
We
in?
live in Scottsdale on 130th and Shea.
Thank you.
Lori Trawler.
Council, Mayor, in front of you, there's an application from the state for a sober home. And that came from the Arizona State website. Highlighted for you is the fact that random alien individuals merely traveling through the United States can apply for a sober home. In case you're ignoring the fact that the United States borders are open and that millions of illegals don't disintegrate when they walk into the country, sober homes is one of the methods used to integrate illegals into the United States. So how can that be? And so let's look at the form. The only information required of an individual to apply for sober home is their name, their physical and email address, and a phone number. That's it. The only form of identification required to apply for sober home ranges from a driver's license to merely an I-94 form, which states an individual is traveling through the United States. And it's worth mentioning that up to 100 people can apply on one I-94 form. As an illegal who can't fill out this form, that's addressed in here too. There's a section for somebody else to fill it out for them. So there you have it. Those are the state requirements to apply for sober home ownership in Arizona: a name, address, a phone number, and an email address. Oh, also, and a check to cover the licensing fee, which with little explanation can be waived, let alone it's not required for homes under 5. So if keeping recovering people safe and local residents supportive wasn't enough reason for a strong ordinance that will pass an FDA inspection, I just gave you another one. Include insurance. Conversations with Planning and Zoning Commission, who's been at this for 21 years in Prescott, advises the single largest reason they were able to properly distribute a healthy number of sober homes in their town was the fact that they required insurance. Florida also has a tremendous problem, and insurance requirements is how they eliminated improper sober operations. So I'm going to change topics. Regarding verbiage of a reasonable accommodation in the ordinance, a sober home applicant seeks a reasonable accommodation under FHA and ADA, not a waiver. The legal terminology for exceptions to any legal ordinance is a reasonable accommodation. FHA, ADA, FDA, even our schools refer to exceptions to reasonable or as reasonable accommodations. There's no ethical reason to change the verbiage. And finally, when you make your changes to the zoning ordinance, could you please explain to the townspeople how each of your decisions benefit the townspeople? And that's it. Thank you.
Liz Gildersleeve.
Good evening. Once again, I am here tonight to ask those of you who have the privilege of sitting on this council to do the right thing by the vast majority of your neighbors and approve the very reasonable planning and zoning recommendations as written, not watered down, for sober homes in our community. Unfortunately, it now appears that council members Charnow and Magazine, in particular, hold those of us who've been vocal about stronger regulations for sober homes with much disdain and contempt. My apologies to both of you for taking an active interest in local issues that directly impact our homes and neighborhoods. Given Mr. Magazine's own recent words several weeks ago where he stated that he, quote, goes 180 degrees in the opposite direction when citizens get to, as he put it, demanding, and Mr. Charnow's own words in last week's Times unusually lengthy opinion piece, as well as his own involvement as the new director, I assume it's a paid position, for the Drug Coalition, not to mention his coalition possibly having received financial donations from the sober home and detox industries, how can the public be assured that Mr. Charnow's and Mr. Magazine's decisions will be objective tonight? As I've said in the past, this is the most important and impactful issue right now for our town. Hence, the reason why you hear from many of us, meeting after meeting. And I hope that I will leave tonight being completely surprised, and that each of you will do the right thing by putting residents first and voting for the very reasonable P&Z recommendations, several of which, excuse me, are already in place today in cities around us. And something that is not often mentioned, the P&Z recommendations would also protect the vulnerable residents living in the sober homes. For example, with a smaller occupancy limit of 5 residents, longer distances between homes for better rehabilitation, and even more robust liability insurance requirements should anything tragic happen in a sober home or neighborhood, and rest assured, it's bound to happen. If you are unable tonight to advocate aggressively for Fountain Hills residents and neighborhoods, then our local elections for a new mayor and new council members cannot come soon enough. Thank you.
If you want me to recess and then we'll go on and on, please don't applaud. It's in the rules. It's ethics. Let's just be polite. Don't applaud. Give everybody a chance to have their say, or I'll just recess and we'll just start again in a half hour. Please stop.
Rita Brown.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me my opportunity to diatribe at you. I had to leave my glass house high up on the hill to address the invasion of a giant industry into my single-family neighborhood. In the recent opinion piece in the Fountain Hills Times, words were used that were intended to shame me into silence. Words such as bias, fear, paranoia, anger. But here's the thing. Every time I remain silent, I lose. It's clear members of my town council believe I'm too biased and paranoid to remember that addicts have families. I must be caring of addicts' families after they have abandoned their own families. But I too have a family, and I choose to protect them first. I made the decision to live in a single-family area as part of my plan for caring. While some council members may believe the fairy tale that people in recovery actually choose to go to recovery, the fact is that many are there against their wills. When the judge said jail or rehab, they opted for a resort lifestyle over jail. Most are not from our town. Many are not even from our state, and some have arranged for drug drops before showing up. Those drug drops increase the presence of drug dealers on my street. For a second time, I interrupted a drug drop at the drug house on Nicholas Drive. I went to the sheriff's office and reported. I've requested increased presence of the sheriff on my street in the hours just before sundown, but that's just my paranoia showing again. The drug industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. A single-family neighborhood is no place for that billion-dollar industry. Our town lawyer is fearful we'll be sued. The federal government requires only that reasonable accommodation be made. As the taxpayer in this town, I consider it more than reasonable accommodation to allow members of that billion-dollar industry into a single-family neighborhood. Just as we tightly regulate height, width, locks, every minute detail for swimming pool fences on private property, we need to have very stringent regulations for our local drug industry. Here's an inconvenient fact. Persons who complete an inpatient rehab program are not significantly more or less likely to succeed at staying clean than their intensive outpatient program counterparts. In other words, it is the intention of the addict that determines treatment outcome. Nothing I do, my bias, paranoia, fear, and anger have no bearing on the outcome of the treatment. How many AA meetings are we hosting in the community center, in the library, and in the town hall? Thank you.
Darla Jacobs.
These are tough people to follow, and I think the first two people said it all, and a lot of replication. I understand that a lot of other people have sent several emails to some of the people in this room, and to no avail. After seeing this slide presentation and the proposal online, I realize that my concerns and the concerns of others have fallen on deaf ears. I also have to admit that the town's building developments and ordinances are being influenced by the political ideology of many of the voting members before me. The key elements of protection for Fountain Hills residents and for sober home living residents have been gutted from the Planning and Zoning Commission's ordinance. The P&Z ordinance strictly adhered to the state's land use perspective, which are the very land use governances that reside with our municipality. They may not be common to other towns, but they are in line with state governances. The P&Z effort also took the better part of a year with the assistance of a retired attorney and concerned residents to put those ordinances together. I'm speaking here tonight because I believe that the proposed ordinance changes lower the bar on the high standards Fountain Hills residents expect from their elected officials and raise the potential for bad actors looking to make large profits from high fees and Fountain Hills' weak ordinances. The topic I have chosen to discuss is the removal of the general liability insurance clause, which is one of 4 major changes to the planning and zoning ordinance. First, the state of Arizona does not require liability insurance. The state also does not prohibit municipalities from requiring it. It's the town's choice and is in line with land use governances. The 2 major operators of several sober living homes in Fountain Hills are for-profit businesses and should be treated as such. It's irresponsible for the governing body of our town not to require liability insurance for a business that has the potential for enormous risk. The risk is such that insurance companies specifically do not cover sober living homes under their standard homeowner or landlord policies. Standard homeowner coverage is not designed for the unique exposures of a recovery residence, and some states make it mandatory to have this insurance due to the litigious exposure. Are we so blind that we do not see the risks to sober living home residents and others? In addition, quoting Michael Charnow's comments recently in the Fountain Hills Times, the municipal risk pool provided with a $10,000 deductible is much more complicated than what's portrayed. It's not an automatic slam dunk. Now I'm really concerned. The town may not even have a backup insurance source. At approximately $20,000 or more for a month's stay in a sober living home, operators can well afford to pay for general liability insurance. They may not like it, but it should be the cost of doing business in Fountain Hills, especially when it provides protection for their vulnerable residents and themselves. Do what's right. Listen to your Planning and Zoning Commission and put the general liability insurance clause back in the ordinance, perhaps without the subrogation clause if necessary.
Richard Witkowski.
Mayor and Council, as many of you know, I'm a 20-plus year resident of Fountain Hills. My comments are directed in part specifically to the issue of Ordinance 22-01 regarding what is now being termed community residences, which and I suspect many of those who are paying attention, consider a creative euphemism for what are more commonly referred to as sober homes. My comments also apply to a broader perspective of town government. First, the specific comments about Ordinance 22-01. The Planning and Zoning Commission has addressed this issue in a responsible, comprehensive manner, and in a way that recognizes the views and concerns of the residents of Fountain Hills that it and you are obligated to represent and serve. The large number of attendees at many past meetings and tonight make the viewpoint of the town's residents very clear. It is clear to me that a few of you on the council, and we know who you are, actually listen to what the residents of Fountain Hills want and what we do not want. Sadly, the rest of you, and we know who you are, prefer to follow another agenda and fail to listen to what the residents want and what we do not want. Now, the broader perspective. We should have a representative government, a government that is responsive, responsible, and accountable. We should not have to fight town government on so many issues, whether it be the lagoon, the primary property tax, daybreak, or this current issue of sober homes, community residences, whatever the title. I'll remind you that all those past ill-advised attempts by council failed, and a few of them failed with a voter turnout that shattered Maricopa County records for voter turnout in a municipal election. We should not have to fight, but we did it before and we can do it again. The point for tonight is that you have the opportunity to listen, to do what is right, to do what the people want, to enact what P&Z has proposed after listening to the people. You have that opportunity. I encourage you to please take advantage of it. Thank you.
Kathy Marks.
Thank you. Mayor Dickey, council members, first I just want to say before I get formal, my heart breaks for this family who lives next door to the 10 men because I see them on their patios with their shirts off, on their patio smoking. I can't imagine living next door with my daughter. It's also very different visiting a sober home during the day than living next door to one. I want to start with a sincere thank you to the P&Z Commission, who has taken the time to really listen to the residents regarding our concerns about the sober living homes in our residential communities. They understood the real-world implications of what it's like to have a sober home, or 2 sober homes, or 3 sober homes in your immediate neighborhood. They understood when we brought in the drug waste, which I found and collected, and I resent the fact that it wasn't true, right? That we found near our homes that proved that drug use was active. We explained our concerns for our families, children, grandchildren, and pets who may get exposed to the waste in our streets and front yards that may still have drug residue or worse, fentanyl residue. They understood when we explained what it's like when there are fights between residents and the police are called in the middle of the night, or screams in the early morning because someone is still detoxing and is having a bad night and the ambulances are called. They understood when we explained that on holidays, ambulances are more common at these sober homes due to suicide attempts. Yes, all this can happen in any home, but take each home and multiply the probability by 8 or 10. Add the talking till late at night on the back patios or the nonstop smoking that goes into your bedroom window, not even mentioning the large Mercedes vans that go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down our streets, then the constant honking when they arrive to let people know it's time to come in and load up. Councilman Magazine said he wanted to rebrand Fountain Hills as a wellness destination. Does that rebranding start now with possibly a detox facility on top of it? Here's my commercial. Heroin addict, meth addict, alcoholic, no problem. Come to Fountain Hills, Arizona. Detox for 90 days in our beautiful small town in the hills above Scottsdale. After your stay, then spend another 90 days in a luxury mansion nestled within a residential community as you try to remain sober. Don't worry if you relapse. You only have to drive another 10 minutes back to the detox facility to start over. I thought we wanted to be known for the new International Dark Sky Discovery Center. Who is going to want to come to Fountain Hills with their family for a vacation when we are known for our drug addicts and detox centers? I'll answer that question for you. No one. Thank you.
Crystal Kavanaugh.
Good evening, Fountain Hills resident. Do not water down this ordinance from either fear of litigation or other motivations. But first, I do want to thank you, Mr. Charnow, for your good works with the youth in the Drug Prevention Coalition. No one here is against drug prevention programs. In fact, youth programs actually have a higher success rate. But the councilman tried to confuse the issue by leveraging his good works and mixing them with this local zoning ordinance that protects our community. He stated as fact that losing in litigation was guaranteed. Why so quick to roll over? Where is the leadership? If towns only follow what others have done, we end up with a cookie-cutter ordinance with no one taking a stand for actual people or locations. Everyone runs scared when a recovery consultant says the word discrimination. Even Mr. Charnow accuses community bias in his article. There have been varying court opinions, and some of these issues have not even been litigated. They've simply been negotiated and accepted. No one denies that there are drug problems here, but I challenge these so-called sober homes to give specifics on the actual number of Fountain Hills residents in them. I say almost all are from elsewhere, and there are many drug programs available across the valley. Approving the key components, such as reduced occupancy to 6, increased distance, and commercial liability insurance, are non-negotiable, in my opinion. And adding that grandfather clause to allow the higher occupancy levels to continue in the current rented, not purchased homes does absolutely nothing to change the status quo, and it's a total cop-out. Decreasing occupancy by their yearly renewal should be required at a minimum. And why fight so hard against the insurance requirement? Legitimate organizations operating properly have no problem obtaining such insurance. If you pass an insufficient ordinance without the key protections, I certainly hope the people of Fountain Hills realize you do not have our best interests at heart and you are not listening once again. Some of you actually seem to have a disdain for the residents who stand up to speak. You think we don't understand the issues of addiction, that we think it's a character flaw or a simple matter of willpower. But in reality, we do indeed understand. And as you said, we have all been touched by it. My very own brother hung himself after years in the cycle of addiction and in and out of treatment programs. Returning to substance abuse is a typical story, but the model requiring million-dollar homes in single-family neighborhoods that house 4 times the average household is not about treatment, it is about money. And neighborhood residents should not have to pay the price. We are not discriminating against the recovery clients, but the residents of Fountain Hills would appreciate it if this council would stop discriminating against us.
Andy Bennett.
Thank you all. Thank you for taking the time to allow me to speak this evening. This will be the 4th time I have come here to speak on behalf of the individuals receiving and seeking treatment for substance abuse in Fountain Hills. Addiction is a condition that carries a lot of baggage. It's very tough to recover from, and despite what the Prescott newspapers of 2017 would have you believe, there's a shortage of effective treatment for addiction. It's estimated that only 30% of drug treatment nationwide meets the minimum standard for care. The success rates are even lower and much harder to track. It's important, though, that we don't confuse the problem with the solution. I think most people can understand what the problem with addiction looks like: broken homes, death, incarceration, and institutionalization. Also, in areas where there's high concentration of drug abuse, crime's a huge problem. We're blessed that that's not a problem in Fountain Hills. The solution for substance abuse is also well documented and well researched: therapy, psychiatry, and peer support. There's been a lot of talk about bad actors in the treatment industry as well. Well, there's bad actors in every industry and every institution worldwide, whether it's institutions such as schools or churches. We've all heard stories that have reverberated across the country. Bad actors do damage to well-intended individuals in all industries. The 2019 Community Views Survey in Fountain Hills found that participants believed that drug and alcohol abuse was the top issue affecting youth in Fountain Hills, followed by anxiety and depression. This series of meetings feels largely in conflict with that poll. Rather than a conversation around how to expand access to care, whether it's increasing the distance radius between homes or reducing the number of people that can reside in the homes, nobody's talked about any flexibility in the newly proposed rules. Such as we are going to restrict access in these locations but increase access over here. There's absolutely none of that. Today's meeting is a continuation of the conversation on how to limit the access to treatment for drug addiction in the city of Fountain Hills and avoid litigation. Exactly how restrictive can we be? It's the same conversation that's been going on for the better part of a year. Lastly, because the city of Prescott is brought up so frequently in these meetings, I'd like to remind everyone that the solution that was put into place to remedy the clustering of sober homes in Prescott are more lax than the zoning requirements already in place in Fountain Hills. Simultaneously, the state of Arizona has also started licensing and regulating sober living homes, which it has never done before. As I said in the last meeting, it feels like a solution in search of a problem, and it's my hope that the regulations on sober living stay as is. A couple off-topic comments that I didn't write.
Almost
Liability.
out of time here, sorry.
Am I out of time?
Not yet, but
Okay.
almost.
Liability insurance, everyone has it. If you want to advertise on Google, you have to have a liability insurance. So I think that you're going to see that's pretty common around. So if you guys require it, that's okay, but everyone has it in a sober living home. If you don't have it and you're operating in Fountain Hills, you can't operate in Fountain Hills. So there's that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bennett, where do you reside?
I reside out of town, just like 90% of the other people who work here.
Larry Myers.
Mayor, council. Well, it's just about all been said, and I've been saying it since last year. But here's another 3-minute diatribe to explain something that is absolutely overlooked and is absolutely pushed by the detoxification industry to confuse the issue. What you're here to discuss tonight, this issue is about allowing a business or businesses to profiteer and bolster bottom lines at the expense of residential property owners, plain and simple. The council, if you don't want to protect the residential property owners, you can ignore reality about this business or promote fallacies. So Councilman Charnow was very excellent in pointing out all of the fallacies in his 1/3 of a page opinion piece in the paper. Others have pointed it out. I'm not going to get into it. But I want to tell you, my conversations with the state at the highest levels have told me that there are no sober homes in Fountain Hills. Okay, so let's get rid of that fallacy. These are residential detoxification facilities. I don't care what you heard. That's what the state says. While Councilman Charnow said that we have problems here, I agree. He says we tend to have them at a lesser degree. And I say, probably, because Fountain Hills is a great place. But I don't see the need for the town to allow a business to take people who don't live here and expand to a point where Councilman Charnow brought up, he doesn't see them proliferating. When I first spoke, there was 1. As I speak, there may be 6. That's a 500% increase in 15 months. I call that proliferation. And I'm going to point out that Mr. Bennett's business is in the business of growing this business. Check his website out. So now back to the real issue, land use. The council continually hides behind the state. This comes from the state. The state is solely interested in the governance of the activity that occurs within the home from a clinical perspective. They have no desire or jurisdiction to address the use of a home for any purpose from a land use perspective. All governances related to land use rest with the municipality. Thus, the word preemption gets thrown around a lot. The only real valid use of the word preemption is that the state, via the DHS, inspects for functional use within the home. Local jurisdictions have not been preempted from land use perspective. And while I'd just like to finish so I can say, while I feel Councilman Charnow's pain because my son
knows his family. I think that that's conflating the issue. And as I stated, I think the P&Z understood this, understood it best, and I'd like to see what they understood put into place. Thank you.
Jane Bell.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. First, I want to thank the Mayor for taking my phone call. It's always good to talk to Jenny. I want to explain the information I used. Phoenix, I talked to Rachel Escalar. Page 5, paragraph 3, general liability required. Page 9, paragraph E, owner must maintain general liability insurance. Page 14, per the permit, a law enforcement officer or agency to inspect. Mesas, Anna Marie, Fantasia. Page 5, license A-7 copy of operator's insurance policy. Page 8, G liability insurance, 1-3-2. Page 6, paragraph 6, inspection. Here's a stack of information that has taken us a year to put together. We sat and read case law up till midnight. Nobody has tried to give you any wrong information. If we did, it was not on purpose. Along with this stack of papers, we were lucky that we had a Representative Kavanaugh that took us under right at the very beginning when we were trying to search out all the different laws and where they've gone. Because of him, we met with their legal department, their code, their head of the DHS, and they really educated us. We are very fortunate, and we can contact him and get to their legal things to get the answers. Why all this information? Years ago, I was involved teaching drug education and saving kids' lives before all of you were born, except maybe magazine.
Jane, it's always a pleasure.
Remember the count of 6 in the House. It has gone to the Ninth Circuit Court. The U.S. Supreme Court, the town may write any ordinance provisions necessary to protect the welfare, including the number of occupants, proving it does not over-discriminate. After talking to the mayor, I realized we were on different roads because these drug items just didn't blow in. I hope you look at the article 2-R9-12-210, the administration of the home. I gave you the state and I gave you the papers out of the Phoenix ordinance that deals with that. Phoenix has 8 pages. I gave you the state to look at. We need people to be involved in our government. 3 minutes you give is important as democracy at work. We in the council should be one team wanting the same outcome. Please go back and look at that article on administrating the home. Be sure you have 24-hour house management, they know CPR, and there's Narcan available in that home that can be given. You have to protect the addicts. The detox ordinance is coming next. I wonder where Fountain Hills is going to be. We've had our property here for over 44 years. We love this town, but I am concerned about where it's going. Addicts can get well in a not $1 million home or riding around in a Mercedes. We have to watch where we're going with it. Thank you.
Representative Kavanaugh.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. State Representative John Kavanaugh, Fountain Hills. First, let me go on record as saying that I erroneously ascribed to staff at the last meeting that they had rewritten the ordinance that P&Z had done, and I had criticized them. However, I since realized that they were simply presenting alternative to the thing, so that was not warranted, and I want to go on the record as saying that. However, I still do disagree with their recommendations because I think they water down an ordinance and lessen the protection that people need. I spoke to the lawyers at the state capitol, and they made it very clear to me that in areas of planning and zoning, the state has not in the least preempted the town from doing regulation in this area. So when it comes to the number of people in the house and the distances, which is planning and zoning, there is no problem with state law. So you may ask, are there any other potential problems? And the answer is yes, federal law, because this has to do with the Americans with Disability Act. And you have to be able to give reasonable accommodation. So when you look at the recommendations and you look at the surveys where this town has so many feet, this town has so many feet, nobody has the half mile, which we recommend, that doesn't mean you can't do that, because the state doesn't control that. It's federal law and based upon what the federal government says. And as we learned at, I think, the P&Z meeting, there are other states that have half miles. So the feds haven't cracked down on these half-mile regulations, so that would seem to suggest that we would be okay with the half mile. So I think that's a reasonable thing to do. The other problem has to do with fear of a lawsuit. If you do a federal violation or a claimed one, you don't go right to court and spend a fortune on lawyers. The first thing the federal government does is they call you in, they talk to you, they may do mediation or arbitration between the parties, or they may say you can't do this. At any point you can back out and you have not racked up massive legal fees. So it's not like going down this road is necessarily prohibitive. I would also state that I think you can do inspections, because state law says that the state can contract with third parties to do inspections. So you could conceivably contract with the state to pick up that role, which you might want to do since they haven't got that much staffing in this area. And if it requires a tweak in the law, I'd be more than happy to do that. I think fire insurance and inspections are important. People with addictions have co-addictions like smoking. A lot of smoking, people who can relapse and get stoned, there's a lot of fire problems there. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. Finally, let me say, be careful about your waiver language, because what I heard was suggested you can drive a truck through. I think any waiver has to be based upon undue hardship that is unique to that particular house. So you don't open up the door where everybody can claim, oh, this is not economically feasible, and get their waiver. In closing, let me say, the people who spoke here tonight who live near these homes are clearly concerned about their quality of life, about their safety, and their peace of mind. Everybody else in this room, everybody else in this town could potentially be in the exact same situation, because these homes can open up next to any of our houses. So these people, the town, even yourselves, right, should expect no more than to have your peace of mind, your safety, right, protected. And you should give no less. Thank you.
Representative Kavanaugh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Can you ask a question?
Yeah, I have a question. I genuinely do feel sorry for the people who live next to these and see men looking in their windows or whatever they're doing. I genuinely do. But I want to ask you, in your mind, based on state law or anything else, is there anything we can do about that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilman Magazine, I would adopt the P&Z's provisions. I would attempt to defend them as best I possibly could. Understand, and I'm not saying this applies to every staff member at every occasion, but I was on this council for 6 years. I've been in the legislature for 16 years. And there's one thing I can tell you about staff. They're conservative in their recommendations. They tread very gently, because this is the bottom line. If a staff member says to you, you can do that, pass that, make it so many feet, and you wind up getting sued and losing, there's a staff member who's concerned about their job, and maybe with good justification. So if the staff member says, you can't do that, don't do it, and you don't do it, that staff member never gets in trouble because there's no lawsuit. But you have to say to yourself, did I shortchange my constituents by not giving them enough protection? So I think P&Zs were reasonable, and I would stick by it and do the best. And if you have to back out, you get back out.
I do hear you, but I'm not sure you've addressed, maybe I didn't make my question clear enough. Let's assume that there's one of these houses right next door to you, and you don't like it. There are problems. Is there anything you can do about it?
Well, I can go to my town council and I could ask to have these restrictions put in. I could have aggressive code enforcement doing inspecting.
But you can't remove them.
No, you can't, because that's federal law. But you can make them as least intrusive as possible. I had that with the party houses, with the short-term rentals. I voted against it from the day one. I was the only senator. I knew it was a disaster. I couldn't stop it, but I did come back the next year and I banned exclusive party event houses. So you go as far as you can.
And
you push the limits.
And we appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
John, I do want to ask something, because when Larry was up here, he said something about that the state cares about what happens inside the house, but then he said somebody from the state told him that it's detoxing that's happening, not sober. So if they're the licensing, what'd you say?
I said that they said that their records showed there were no sober homes in Fountain Hills.
So these
said they are detoxification facilities in residential properties. The state did not say that. So
the state said there are no sober living homes, but that they are only responsible for what goes on inside, not the zoning stuff. So how can they license something that isn't really a sober living home? How is it existing? We have 4, and they're sober living homes licensed by the state. So why would the state admit that there's no sober living homes?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to the definition. There's a medical definition, there's a legal definition, but the bottom line is, these people are in some stage of detox because, quite frankly, they wouldn't need all this treatment if they didn't have an addiction and they didn't need to kick that addiction. They're just in a later stage than if they have to be in a hospital.
Well, they are not technically, because a detox couldn't happen in residential area, couldn't be licensed to happen in a residential area, correct?
From the legal standpoint, but obviously these people still crave drugs. It's not, the craving's not out of their system. So I guess if detox is considered a medical, biological thing, then they're not detoxing. But in their minds, I think they're still going through a stage that's close enough for government.
Thank you. It just... Thanks. I give up.
Barry McBride.
Madam Mayor, Council, my business is right across the street. I own 2 buildings in Fountain Hills, but I'm sad to say I'm a resident of Scottsdale. Haven't been able to get my wife to move here yet, but I'm working on it. Would like to say I'm so impressed with the citizens. I'm inspired by the quivering voices, and I think that with the quivering voices, that would help you look at things maybe from a different perspective. In this situation, serving along with the P&Z, there was research done beyond Arizona border, which was really impactful, and I think that was reflected very well in their recommendation. So we encourage you again to adopt P&Z's recommendation as given. We think that's very, very important. Mission number 1 of the council, I would assume, to serve and protect the people. And when we hear stories of people that are not being served and not being protected, is very inspiring. It's very concerning. And it's the type of a story that would change the way that you think, to look at things through the lens of leadership as opposed to following other municipalities' undue restrictions. It's a very, very concerning thing. And the issue is we now have commercial enterprises in residential zones. That causes the quivering voices of those that have come up and spoken, which is quite unfortunate. It really is. Interesting, I cannot run a commercial insurance agency in a residential area, but we can have detox facilities there. It's a real, real concern. I implore you to listen to the quivering voices, to consider what they're going through and living through. It's the lens of leadership, and I'll follow up with this. I serve on a committee at the Phoenix Zoo, And one thing that we do at the Phoenix Zoo is we are very, very considerate of where we place different species because of the amount of stress that it causes from one to the other. So, said respectfully, because I will say that my cousin died of a heroin overdose. So I do care deeply for those in treatment. But his treatment was at a facility, not in a residence. But the key is we have to make sure that we have commercial and residential, because otherwise the mixing of the two creates an undue stress that's unfair for residents. Thank you.
John Pio? Pio, I'm sorry. I know I had it once before, and I couldn't remember how I pronounced it.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you. My wife and I have been residents of Fountain Hills for 19 years. Fountain Hills is blessed in many ways, and in particular relating to this agenda item, it's blessed to have a Planning and Zoning Commission that's willing to do all of the hard work necessary to generate the best possible recommendations that serve the interest of the town and its residents. In particular, the chairman, Peter Gray, is obviously highly competent, talented, and motivated to do the best possible job in supporting you all on the council. My observations are that the recommendations developed by Chairman Gray and the commission were based on extensive research, factual evidence, due sensitivity to legal issues, and consideration of what best serves this community, as well as the operators and especially the residents of the sober homes. I believe the recommendations should be adopted substantially as proposed and not be weakened because of supposed or speculated future litigation. We've all seen the disastrous results of weak ordinances in other locales, and we're feeling some of those consequences within our own community. And they're not rumors, and I think there's people here that would disagree that this is a solution in search of a problem. The adoption of strong but fair ordinances may carry some risk of litigation, but what possible legitimate consideration can come before protecting this town and its residents? Thank you.
Alan Skillicorn.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, staff, and also thank you for your time, your commitment, and evenings like this go late, and we want to respect your time and thank you and appreciate your time. My name is Alan Skillicorn, and I'm just here because I think people are more important than special interests. And when I look at that planning and zoning ordinance that was unanimously approved, it just seems like it's very common sense to me. It seems reasonable. When I listen to my neighbors, they seem to agree with me too. They say, I hear it over and over, common sense, reasonable. They seem to agree with me too. And I hear tonight, with the presentation and some of the questions and comments, it sounds like I heard the word can't a lot. And I'd really like to hear the word can. And to give you an example of the differences. We talk about, the state does inspections, the town can't do inspections. The state doesn't require insurance. The town can't require insurance. When I hear this, I just can't. Well, I believe in the word can. So we have a state legislator that's in the audience here who lives in town here. If we need to change a state law, he can propose the legislation. It may not be immediate. It might take some time. It might be next session that this happens. But we, the people, can change the law here in the state. This town also has a congressman that resides in the town. Many of us have his cell phone number in our phones. If federal law is a problem, if ADA is a problem, we can approach him and he can file legislation. And potentially that could be changed. That could be changed long period of time, short period of time, but we can affect change. And I just want to point that out. When I hear the proposed ordinance about the waiver, there was a couple objections there. One that I did not hear of an objection is the commission, the three-person commission for the waiver. Now, one issue I have with that is that this is an unelected commission. The people in there are not accountable to the public because they're not elected. I do have a significant problem with that. I hear a complaint about, a recommendation of lowering the distance. Still, I think the people of this town deserve to have an opportunity to not have these in clusters. Considering the topography of our town and the washes, the half a mile does not seem unreasonable. Now, I don't want a couple other things, like if one of these facilities moved in next door to you, would you be okay that they weren't required by the town to have liability insurance? Think about it. If they were next door to you, would you be okay with that? If one moved next door to you, would you be okay if the town did not come in and do inspections? Would you be okay with that? If one moved in right next to you, would you be okay with the limit of 6 versus 10? Would you be okay with that? And the reason I asked the question in such a way is because there are people in here that have these right next door to them, and they are not okay with the watering down of this ordinance. So I respectfully ask, if you feel uncomfortable with watering down any of these items, tonight is the night to speak up. Tonight is the night to do so. And I don't know if you guys are open-minded to keeping the planning and zoning recommendations. I hope you are. But if you have any feeling that you're uncomfortable with not having insurance, not having inspection, not having these limits, speak up tonight. The people of the town want to hear you. Thank you so much.
Ed Stizza.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Town Council, and staff, and the residents of Fountain Hills. I cannot say anything more other than, finally, you guys are going to be held accountable for your vote tonight. This is an important vote. You have heard from all the residents, you have heard from the town, you have heard from everybody you possibly can. And if you can't make the right decision this time, then God help you. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are all the speaker cards. I think, so right now, I just want to say a couple of things. So I understand that you would like us to follow exactly what Planning and Zoning said, but I think you noticed even at the last meeting, some of the changes that we made were necessary, and no one objected to them on Planning and Zoning either. I think, I know you want us to listen, and I believe that we have been listening and obviously care about this. Representative Kavanaugh knows about how I feel about the short-term rentals, and I feel like it's kind of the same sort of intrusion it can be. But we also, we are preempted in a lot of ways. Part of me sees the state as the licensing entity, that they should be responsible to make sure that they're not detox, or there's no active treatment going on, or that there's not 12 people living there, or whatever they made those accommodations to give them the license. Why are they not in charge of taking care of them? And if we don't like the fact that something has to happen that the state tells us to do, why isn't that, and you did mention that, going back to trying to change some of those laws, but when you talk about the insurance, it literally was the state law that made Phoenix, Mesa, and Prescott have to take that off their books. So I don't know how that translates into us being able to do that with the state. The other things that were talked about, everybody goes through that at one point or another with a neighbor, whether it's a dog or fighting people or the smoking, or you don't have a smoking neighbor ever. You don't have fights ever. What I'm saying is that when Alan asked about what would you do about that, some of this stuff is a little you know, it's not cut and dry. But I do ask, since we do have some folks here in the industry, you know, sometimes you have to act like neighbors, like we have to ask a neighbor about a dog or about smoking or about fighting or partying or any of that kind of stuff. So, so we have to weigh a lot of different things as we move forward, including the law. So that's what's going through our minds. There's no hubris here. There's no fun here. There's nobody trying to help somebody with some motivation or another. We have been trying to make our way through this in the best way for all 25,000 people that live here. So anyway, do I close the hearing? Can we continue to speak after that?
Mayor, you can go ahead and close the hearing, and then if council members have additional comments, by all means.
Okay. So additional discussion on what we went through? Jerry? And Vice Mayor?
Mayor, tonight we heard a lot of people mention the insurance issue. So I'm just wondering if there's some kind of a model for rated risk that we could take a look at across the board for all of our business community, so that we're not singling out one sector of the business community. And I'm wondering if there's some model or something that we can take a look at to give us some more information in that area.
I have a couple of thoughts in response to that question, Councilman. I have a couple of thoughts in response to that question, Councilman. The first is that, is there some sort of model? I mean, sure, there are model policies, right? Like, you know, the insurance industry has model policies all the time for commercial general liability, property owners insurance, and it's just a question of what's the nature of the business and what's an appropriate limit. I'm not sure how we as a town go with every business and try to figure out what limits would be appropriate for every type of business. But assuming that it was possible, it's at least one of the things that sounded reasonable tonight is that it, and I'm kind of looking out this direction toward Mr. Bennett. He made a representation that sounds as though the industry wouldn't have an issue with that sort of a provision. So I mean, I don't know if it needs to, maybe it doesn't even necessarily need to be an issue, right? If I don't know, I'm sort of, that was news to me.
That's kind of where I was going,
Yeah.
because when he made that statement, I'm thinking there's got to be a way to work that out.
Yeah, I mean, right. My point is that, look, if it's something that the industry doesn't have an issue with, right? I still don't think it's something that under state regulations that we can require it of a specific industry, right? But on the other hand, if this is a sticking point and we mutually all recognize that it's a sticking point that's a distinction without difference, then maybe we say include it and move on. If some of the folks who have spoken here tonight in favor of reasonable regulations are okay with that. But I'm not going to put words in anyone's mouth. I'm just trying to come up with a reasonable solution here that sort of makes both parties mutually satisfied.
Can the state require insurance?
I'm sure the state could require insurance if it chose to.
And-
You can't get a mortgage without insurance.
Right. But the town can't require somebody that buys a home to get homeowner insurance. What we're talking about us having the ability to require insurance of one particular area, and that's the sticking point that the state, at least.
The state is the licensing agency.
Yeah.
The state doesn't have that requirement.
The state can require it.
I only have one thing to say is that from all the insurance companies that I looked at, every one of them has an extra package for sober homes.
I understand, sir. Thank you.
And their risk reward, they're all doing that because of the risk reward.
I understand. I guess what we're trying to get to the bottom of is the authority of the town to require insurance from a particular enterprise, business, home, whatever you want to call it, and we don't feel like we don't have that authority. Okay.
Land use governance, you can require it under that.
I don't know what the, I don't know what the result of that is, because I came in here with the idea that we do not have the authority to require insurance.
And I still believe that's the case.
And you still believe that's the case. Okay, thank you.
Follow up, then you're saying the state could do it.
Definitely.
So we have,
Certainly.
well, we have legislative Kavanaugh here, who perhaps can try to make that happen at the legislative level. And I see him nodding in agreement that maybe that's possible.
The other thing that I think we might have had some discussion about was the distancing thing. So, the 1320 was the quarter mile. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Mayor. Yeah, Aaron, my understanding that 1320 is the farthest distance between these homes in any jurisdiction in Arizona, is that correct?
You're not doing me any favors tonight, Councilman Mixon. That is correct.
Okay, so 1320.
And that's in an attachment to agenda item
Right,
8B.
right. So when it comes time for a motion, I would be happy to make the motion to have it set at 1320 as opposed to 1200.
Is there any other discussion on this item? Mike?
No, in my oft-quoted opinion piece from last week, I said I was willing to look at changes and compromises and such, and I too think 1320 is a good compromise from what was proposed when looking at other jurisdictions, so.
I agree. I feel like we don't want to be the test of waters above the 1320. I think part of our job on council is to help protect from lawsuits. So I feel like there's, 3 at 1320, and there was 5 or 6 at 1200. So I feel like 1320 is probably a safe place to go.
Motion. Mayor, I'm going to move this along. I'm going to move that the separation requirement be set at 1,320 feet. Yeah, I made a motion.
Well, are we going to, do you want to take these one at a time, or how do you want to do this?
I think the best option, respectfully, Councilman Magazine, I think the best option might to go through those 5 areas that Director Wesley said. Then if we can make a motion all at once, that might really help. That might help us out.
Okay. Well,
right. We still have to actually get the ordinance right. Kind of.
yeah, so that we would take the break.
Yeah.
So I'm good with the 6 and 8. If that's something anybody
6 and
wants
8,
to
you
talk
mean
about.
for occupancy? Thank you, Mayor.
I'm willing to consider a lowering of where we're at. I just think going down to 6 and 8 is too much. And I'm kind of surprised in terms of all this comment this past year. I mean, no one from the, what are we calling them? The family community residences, no one from that industry has come forward to question us or give suggestions. I mean, this is going to impact them as well. And we're kind of separating the two subcategories. I understand that, but I think we're lowering the family one just to kind of give credence to lowering the other one. And I mean, this could impact future people who want to open, these family community residences in the community. I mean, maybe the feeling is 10's enough, but on the other hand, it's like we don't hear complaints about these homes. So this industry is going to be impacted by this ordinance as well. I just want to point that out. But to me, 6 and 8 just is too much. But most of the communities, the vast majority, are at 10 plus staff, and I'm not proposing that, but I just think what's on the table here is too much.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm good with 6 and 8, and what it boils down to for me is quality of care. I think it's important. I have several members of my family who are involved with drug and alcohol abuse, and I've seen it firsthand. So 6 and 8 for me are good because of the improved quality of care, and it's got to be number one with dealing with this. So I'm good with those numbers.
While I agree with Councilman Charno that I kind of feel like 10 is a better number, I would be okay with talking about 6 and 8 if we said that that does not include live-in staff. I do have a problem with 6 or 8 people if that includes live-in staff.
So we want to make sure we can come up with something that Aaron feels he can move forward with. So I don't think we're there right now. I think we probably need to hear from everybody else. David?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I stated before, well over a month ago, that I would not budge from that number. I will continue to steadfast and say that it's 6 and 8, or I'm a no vote.
Alan?
Well, just a matter of getting it on the record. I agree with Councilwoman Grabowski. 6 and 8, not including staff, makes sense to me.
Well, I'd go along with that.
Any other?
I think 6 and 8 with staff is fine.
6 and 8 with staff, including staff. Okay.
For the community residents, 6 to 8 with staff, and the transient one, 6.
Your mic. Can't hear your mic not on.
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, sorry. I think that with the community residents, up to 6 to 8 with staff is appropriate, and the other one, the transient one, up to 6 with staff is appropriate. I think that given what was said tonight with the neighbors' concerns, that about how many people they see and things like this, I think this is a reasonable number. It's less than what was recommended, and it just seems like it would work. Thank you.
And I know that the idea of neighborhood, how many people are in each house isn't something that they say is legitimate to use in a legal way maybe, but I think it does reflect on neighborhoods, and just like with short-term rentals or anything else, trying as best as we can under the constraints that we have to keep neighborhoods and the character of neighborhoods as residential areas is important. So there may be 4 for 6 and 8 with including staff. Did you see that? Yeah. You agree? Yes, ma'am. Okay. What was the other thing? License, insurance, the inspections.
That we not require inspections, that it's the state licensing agency does the inspections. We can't do unannounced inspections.
I think we could maybe help with the efforts to the legislature, whether it's for funding or for whatever it takes, so that inspections can be done regularly, can be relied on, they can be requested. But that also reminds me, though, that there's complaints online that, well, we just got some information today, and you touched briefly on it, that I think 94 complaints were made in the last year, and 91 resulted in citations. So I think it's a responsive mechanism that the state has in place. So I don't think that the town has the jurisdiction or the ability to do these unannounced inspections. Like I said, we do the fire inspections, and if there's code enforcement sort of stuff, litter, anything that you see on the outside, too many cars, working on a car, all those kind of things, we already have that ability for code inspection, but an interior inspection unannounced, we don't have the authority to do that, but I'd be happy to help the state and advocate for funding or whatever it takes for the staff to be able to do that, and then they could do that for all their cities.
I just wanted to reiterate, when you said it was 94 complaints that went in and 97 citations, that was based on the state number, not on Fountain Hill's number.
Oh, right.
Just wanted to make sure that we said that.
Mayor?
Yes.
I'm wondering if the state outsources for those inspections, is that something that we can get hooked up with to do that in our own town? If the state is the one that's outsourcing that, is that something we can check on? I don't know.
It's something we can check on. I have no idea whether a municipality serves as a third-party contractor. It would be unusual. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I don't know. Yeah.
So basically, it would be like they would hire somebody, but we would have to have that staff to be able to do that. And
Yeah,
such.
right. I mean, typically, what you're going to see with any government body is they're going to do a procurement for, an outside agency to conduct their inspections, like how we do for third-party inspections for certain projects.
Oh, right.
So I can't imagine it's that different. Maybe there's like a work share agreement or something like that. So it's possible. I just don't know the answer to the question.
Mike?
Yeah, I think, Madam Mayor, thank you. Along the lines of, changes needed at the state level, I mean, one of the speakers talked about this initial application form and issues with, aliens applying, that kind of thing, the very loosey-goosey restrictions. Well, again, that you need to talk to the state legislature and other folks at the state level to change this form then. If it's inadequate or you think it's lacking, that's, again, this is not a Fountain Hills form, it's a state one, so take it up with the state.
Do you understand what's happening then here, right?
Maybe I can summarize really
Yeah.
quick. And the town manager gave a good suggestion about getting some consensus, whether through a vote or otherwise, before we go and try to figure changing out language on the 6 and 8, whether it's including staff or not including staff. Include. I see 4 head nods. So if someone wants to try to, that's how we'll come back with it.
As long as we do the grandfather language and the appeal language.
Yeah. Reese, you were suggesting having a vote so that they can vote on the ordinance as a whole.
Well, the suggested motion does say the ordinance, that they approved the amended ordinance with
Okay.
the amended.
I think I understand what the council's looking for. Do you want me to reiterate so that we're all on the same page? Okay. And then if I'm missing anything, maybe Director Wesley can help us out. Sounds like the consensus is for 1,320-foot distancing requirement. Occupancy limits at 6 for transitional, 8 for community residences. That would be including staff in both respects. We didn't discuss this, but something that staff is recommending needs to be reinserted is the waiver language. It sounds like we have a consensus about insurance requirements, about not including those insurance requirements. It sounds like we have consensus, at least there was no objection to Councilwoman McMahon's request to remove the last clause of Section 3B8, which doesn't have a material effect on the ordinance. We have a consensus about the inspection requirements, about removing those. And am I missing anything, John? No. Yes. Am I missing anything, John? And hopefully everyone heard what I just said, so I don't have to.
The membership of the appeal, the 3-person committee, which it's purposely not elected, I think, because I think we're trying to look at a way of getting it real straight, just Board of Adjustment, doesn't get straighter than that.
And Mayor, it looks like, my guess is we'll go ahead and include that in the way, as a provision of the waiver language.
Because everybody
So-
was okay with
Is everyone's okay with that?
P&Z,
Okay.
Board of Adjustment, Director.
Right, that's what I thought.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we said that it would either be the P and Z chair, or if he's not able to make it, a designee.
Yeah.
And that would be same with the Board of Adjustments?
I would assume so,
Okay.
yes. Mhm.
And just another note, so we're going to do some follow-up on the insurance, whether, and also the inspection, with whether the state will allow
Right.
or hire us to.
Yeah. So it sounds like the consensus is for these requirements to either be modified or removed, with the recognition that there's something that probably can and should happen at the state level. So hopefully we can have that as a legislative priority, if that's something the council chooses to do.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I may jump in, the one thing that you really haven't discussed much, but I did bring up at the end of my presentation, is we talked about the legal nonconformities and the possibility of transfer of a license. That we might add some language into the ordinance that deals with that to make sure that's clear what those rules are. So that would be another piece that we would add in here as we bring this back for your final consideration, if that's agreeable.
Non-conforming use? the non-
Existing facilities.
Yeah, and the
Councilmember.
non-transfer of the license.
That the license of the owner would not be not transferable.
Right.
100%.
And again, we are bound to keep people that they bought their property or they're operating a business under certain zoning, and then if that zoning gets changed, this is what happened with parking requirements over by McDonald's, because that was there before any of the zoning was. So that's a non-conforming use, and we are not able to change zoning out from under people that are there. But if a new one should pop up, or new operator, or new residents, they will know going forward that this is the law. Yes, sir.
I have a question. So will the reasonable accommodation review, will that be a public process, or will that be behind closed doors, or how is that going to be handled?
I can answer it. Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily right to say closed doors, but it's intended to be an administrative process. Generally, as far as I know, I'm not aware of actually one that is like a council process. Maybe there is one, and I'm just not aware of it. But they generally are administrative processes at a staff level. And in this instance, we happen to be taking it in a hybrid approach, right, with 2 council appointees and then a member of staff. That would be your zoning administrator, development services director.
I don't have any issue with it being an administrative process, but by the same token, I think that administrative process should be open to the, it should be made public. Not necessarily the hearing itself, but the results and the evidence presented and everything, that would be a matter of public record, correct? Because I'm vehemently opposed if this is done and the public does not know about it.
Right. So recognizing that there are certain restrictions on what we can release, on what a public body can release with respect to sober living homes, like, for example, an address, it's not a matter of public record. I don't have an issue necessarily an issue if the fact of the proceedings and the outcome of a proceeding is a matter of public record. That's just town business.
Yeah, do we have like a parallel on that, on if anybody ever asks for, like, say anything that happens when they want to change zoning or the Board of Adjustment, because they have that criteria, specific criteria, so would they be able to then say, yes, they met this, this, and this, without actually holding it in public? Okay.
Yeah, do we need to recess, John, to gather our thoughts for a second? Mayor, is that all right if we recess?
Yes, we'll do that, and then this way we can wrap it up and actually finish with it tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.
before Aaron tells us what he came up with, does council have any further discussion? Yes, Vice Mayor?
I just want to say that I know Planning and Zoning had looked for a half a mile distance between the two homes, and while I'm encouraged by that and actually wanted to side with that in an attempt to get this put to bed and reach a unanimous decision by this council, I'm willing to sacrifice that part of it and go with the 1320. So.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. We appreciate that. I think there's a lot of give and take going on here, and we certainly appreciate that from everybody and your understanding. So how do we want to proceed?
So Mayor, the recommendation would be if I can tell you what sections we're sort of planning to remove based on the discussion and what they relate to, and then what minor language we're adding based on the discussion. And then any council member who wishes to do so can simply say so moved, so you don't have to repeat everything. Does that work? Yep. Okay. All right. And by the way, this is moving to adopt ordinance number 22-01 as proposed in the staff report with the following modifications. In section 5.13A1, change 2,640 feet to 1,320 feet. In section B2, remove the last sentence after, or remove the provision regarding inspections. Subsection B5, remove subsection B5 regarding commercial general liability. And the companion change to that would be in subsection C, 5B, to remove that.
Did you say C?
C, 5B, it's on page, it's under the registration section. Yeah. I said B, sorry, B, B, yep. B, the insurance policy required by B5, because there is no insurance policy required by B5 anymore.
And then 8F2?
Sorry?
8F2?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, the changes suggested by Councilwoman McMahon. Yes, thank you. Subsection D in the registration section, or no, subsection D will be a new section that we discussed regarding the transfer of ownership licenses. It will read, any community residence that is in operation as of the adoption of this section shall be considered a legal nonconforming use consistent with section 4.01B of the zoning ordinance. Any new community residence or any residence that is in operation but that transfers ownership shall be subject to the provisions of this section.
So it's citing existing ordinance.
Yeah.
Perfect.
New subsection E will be just incorporating the waiver language as proposed previously to P&Z. The only change to that will be to the last section that says the Reasonable Accommodation Committee shall be composed of the Town Development Services Director, the Chair of the Board of Adjustment or his or her designee, and a member, or excuse me, and the Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission or his or her designee. Want to make sure I didn't miss anything, if you'll give me a second. Insurance requirements, 1320. Oh, the occupancy limits will remain as written, because that's as proposed. And then I believe there was not as a part of the ordinance, but some direction to staff to pursue as a legislative priority or at a state level, some additional tools for either the state or the municipalities to use to pursue insurance requirements, et cetera. And I think we remember that discussion. So that's my statement of what the proposed motion would be based on the discussion that we had.
Aaron, could you include taking out in the violation and section number 2A, required insurance. Yeah. That's in there? Okay.
I think he did. I think it was all in there.
Oh,
It's on page 7, it's on page 8.
that's actually an additional section that
Two-
is.
yeah, it's in
that's
two
good.
places.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll make that change administratively. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? Yes, David.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a good sidebar on recess with State Representative Kavanaugh, who had a very good idea about us possibly approaching the state and entering into an agreement with them as a third party, that we would have their permission to possibly enter into an agreement that we would inspect the facilities on their behalf. So I think that that's definitely something that I would like to see Aaron follow up on with State Rep Kavanaugh on that. And you already stated the insurance thing. I too, along with Vice Mayor Friedel, would like to have seen the distance to be a little greater than the 1320 as proposed for the 1850. But, everybody doesn't always get what they want. So I stuck firm for the fact that the 6 and the 8, which I believe is a little bit more important than the actual distance. I'm okay with the 1320, but I'm happy that after having the conversation with the state rep, that I think there's some remedies that we can follow down the road that would help us. So as long as we're in collaboration with him and everything, I think it benefits the town and the residents.
And I'm really glad to hear you say that too, because one of the things that we did forget to mention was that 1487. And so if we had taken action that any legislator objected to, regardless of what the motivation was, if they could also put this all back on state share revenue and things like that. So we try to comply with as much as we can and still do the things that the communities would like us to do and that we want to do too. But that was just another risk that's there with pretty much anything we do. So to know that you're talking to John like that is great.
And just to follow up, I cannot put into words how grateful I am for all of the residents. I mean, you guys put in hundreds of hours in researching this, sending us emails, sending us case law. Hats off to the residents. I know it gets tiresome that you guys constantly have to fight with us. I didn't need Mr. Myers to bring up, daybreak or permanent primary property tax or all of the other things that you guys have fought us on, and I just really appreciate the residents. I appreciate town staff for all the work. John Wesley, I know I mess with him a lot, but he did put his heart and soul into this. Jane Bell herself said that she appreciated what he had did, and we put a lot of thought into this. So I know everybody's not going to be happy. I'm expecting that. But I think it's the best of what we could accomplish this evening. So thank you very much to the residents and to town staff, and to you, Aaron. And thanks.
Really appreciate that, David, a lot. And since we did bring up daybreak, and those things were, in the past, other councils, we all had different opinions on everything. So there's nothing aligning here. We're just doing the best we can to navigate this. Would somebody like to make a motion?
So move to adopt ordinance 2201, including the amendments as discussed by the council this evening.
Thank you. Second. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. I think you got that, Liz? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll move on to our next item, which is Maricopa County Animal Care and Control.
Mayor and council, due to the late hour, we'll be very brief on our remarks, but Community Services Director Rachel Goodwin will give a brief report on this item before you.
Yes, brief being the key word here. So, as many of you know, we have an existing agreement with Maricopa County Animal Control to enforce and implement our needs in regards to animal care, whether that's stray dogs, whether that's assistance with officer needs in terms of Maricopa MCSO, sick animals, stray animals, all of those types of things. So they are our provider. This is a quick look at what they provide for us. So this is just a quick bulleted list of all of the different things that they do for us. They also are our shelter services. So when they have a stray dog or a dog submitted or a dog turned in, surrendered, they also serve as our shelter facility. The contract amount is just shy of $32,000. The previous contract was $30,318. This is a new formula that they've implemented, which is why we need to redo our IGA with them. I know there was some questions about what their enforcement has been over the last year or so. I have these stats are from our January 1st through March 31st quarterly bill. This gives you just an idea of the different things that they've assisted with here in Fountain Hills.
Do they do anything with wild animals?
They do not. They are not the resource for that. We either work with Game and Fish or other resources for wild animals.
Okay, and I'm seeing the leash law thing, and just to say it out loud, you know, we have leash laws in town, and these are the folks that enforce it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll make it quick. I know everybody wants to go. Rachel, how often are they here? Because January to March, I'm sorry, that activity isn't blowing me away.
So again, everything from trips out that we have them on an as-needed called basis. So they only come when there is a issue that they are called out for. Most of that is what you're seeing here. We also have 10 scheduled sweeps that we schedule with them throughout the season. And that's when they come out and actively patrol in our parks for roughly 6 hours each sweep. So we have 10 of those throughout the year, throughout the calendar year.
Okay. Would you keep the council informed of their activity? Like I said, you know, I've been preaching about wanting to know what code enforcement does. We put a lot of money into code enforcement. Now we're putting $30,000 into this. I want the residents to know that the money that we're spending of their tax dollars is beneficial.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I just wanted to just chime in. For many years, what you see before you was mostly just the shelter services. And then the council wanted us to step up the enforcement. And so the enforcement added additional costs. So, but the base contract that we have is mostly for the shelter and just the routine services that they come out. So it's the additional, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that we started stepping up with the additional sweeps?
Correct. And
because
then,
of complaints we had from residents.
Right. And they were unable to do those during COVID. They didn't have the resources and the means to do so. And then this past year, this past fiscal year, we stepped those up more actively again during our high seasons. They were, other than just us giving them some direction of which parks to, you know, hit this park and this park, take a look over here. This is where we're getting the most complaints from our residents. There's not a lot of activity. Originally, they took a stance of trying to educate and say, hey, this is a warning. You need to make sure that you have your dogs on leash. At the first of the year, we kind of said, hey, we've had enough of the warning situation. We need to go ahead and start enforcement. So that's what you're seeing here. You can kind of see that they had 29 leash law violations out at our parks on these. So that was through that quarter. And that they've had 10 fines paid and 7 currently outstanding.
And if I could just touch upon Councilmember Spellage's comment about having more transparency and reports. I did meet with the Development Services Director today, and he did show me a report that we're going to start sharing with the council. So showing activities for code enforcement. So I think this is a good suggestion. We should probably do maybe a semi-annual report on the animal control activity.
Great.
Thank you. So the 31,000 includes all the shelter stuff. Okay, thanks. Any speaker cards? I'd like to make a motion?
Move.
They just want to hear you.
Just curious how that breaks down by park.
I don't have it by, they don't have it by park. I could probably reach out to get that from them. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Can I get a motion?
Move to adopt Resolution 2022-11, approving the IGA with Maricopa County Animal Care and Control.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Our next item is about Maricopa County again, flood control.
So I'll have Justin Waldier, Public Works Director, give the presentation on this.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, council members, we come before you tonight to ask for your consideration in approving an amendment to an IGA to move it out further. Brief story, this is directly related to the storm events in Golden Eagle Park in the impoundment area in 2018 and 19. A grant was received from Maricopa County Flood Control. Obviously, we're not at the point where we can begin to spend the majority of their money. We're hoping to be there early next fiscal year. With that said, we need to amend this so we can continue to bill them for the services that are rendered related to the project. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer.
Any questions? No? Speaker cards? Motion, page 218.
Move to adopt Resolution 2022-017.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Justin.
You're welcome.
We skipped the next one because we put that off. And then the legislature, and Sharon, did you have anything to say about that? No? You were on the call, huh? All right. Well, we have issues. I know. Well, just one I want to mention because it's a new one. And the ADOT omnibus bill is being held up due to somebody, I'm not sure who, but they want to make it so that towns can't regulate truck traffic. So basically, city Litchfield Park, they just implemented, it was supposed to go into effect 2 days ago, where they had an area of town where the big trucks can't go through. They now are being opposed with that, the Arizona Trucking Association and also truckers. So it does say cities would have to have a diagram that indicates that the truck could not use those roads safely. So I don't think it can just be about like weight or, you don't want a big concrete truck going in certain areas. Well, yeah. So anyway, this is kind of one of the new things. And the city of Avondale provides police protection for Litchfield Park, and they were supposed to start doing that yesterday, but so it's all on hold. And there's a bunch of other things that aren't good, so. All right.
Motion to adjourn? Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Good night.